In the forest clearing, the demon-like living darkness hovers over the hero's body. Chaos spreads around and one guard shouts, "Retreat," and also asks why his comrade at the gates is still not fleeing. But the young guard does not flinch, he simply looks and calmly replies that they have not even reached the main store yet. A mob soldier who once became the strongest thanks to deep knowledge of the game now hides his true power. He brushes off the brewing crisis as if it were a trifle and rushes forward to intercept the demon. The world he found himself in now is the RPG Brave of Asterisk or Brias. In it, players took on the role of the hero Alan, fighting demons and forging strong bonds with friends. This very game captivated him completely even before he was reincarnated into it. His previous life ended abruptly. He died of exhaustion at the exploitation company. And he still considers himself lucky he was reborn in the beloved Briars, so now he lives as a simple gatekeeper in the capital Salentia. While he thinks about this, a voice calls him by a new name, Silva. The guard named Maud says it's time to change shifts. Silva agrees and sighs to himself. It's a pity, of course. He wasn't reborn like the hero's Alan, but this new reality is probably not so bad. When he leaves, Maud leaves a reminder, pick something up on the way. He walks through the bustling city with a satisfied stride after that swamp work from his past life. It feels like a breath of fresh air. Standing guard by the gate and getting paid even just for passing the day-almost paradise. He approaches the street vendor for his usual. He walks slowly, but his attention is immediately drawn to a nearby stage. The seller brazenly thrusts a sword at a young woman and presses, boasting about the highest quality of the item and swearing he will give it to her for a pittance. The woman politely explains she is not a fencer, but Silver immediately recognizes her Charles Orland, an important character who becomes a friend early in the game. A wave of admiration washes over him. She was his favorite heroine. The merchant continues his trade, claiming it is a sacred sword blessed by the Fairy King, so powerful that even an inexperienced novice would be compelled to draw the weapon. Inside, Silver knows the man is lying, mocking the attempt to deceive Charlie, though he admits her naivety looks quite cute. Seeing her live is a painfully incredibly sweet experience that overwhelms completely. He feels deep gratitude for his death and rebirth, thanks God for this very moment. He froze until a shout from another young boy with spiky hair rang out across the square. He was showing Charles exactly where to go. The novice confidently stepped forward and, pointing at the merchant, declared that the sword was a fake. The Silver immediately recognized him. This is Alan, the protagonist of Brave of Asterisk. The player's avatar, and seeing him live is strange, especially considering that in the plot Alan is destined to become Charles's lover. Then Alan suggested escorting Charles to the castle gates while she gathered herbs. She agreed, and they set off together, leaving Silu standing alone in shock, and he whispered his name under his breath. While he gloomily watched them disappear, a merchant approached him and began pressing him not to believe Alan's words. Then the man offered to sell him a sword for a pittance. The shopkeeper did not stop and continued to push his speech. He said that with this saber, even an ordinary person could become a hero, and from these words, Silu's attention was caught almost instantly. His face hardened slightly. He extended his hand and stopped the merchant's palms with his own, after which he calmly declined the offer. With a soft smile, he explained that he was only a gate guard, and an ordinary sword was quite enough for him. His simple refusal threw the trader into complete confusion. The older man called him a weirdo and turned away, muttering that he should try to sell this sword to someone else. When the merchant left, Silva's determination grew stronger. He was not a hero, just a background, a crowd character. That role was held by Alan. This news about the verdict grew out of his former life. He remembered how he was overwhelmed with work, and how the role in Bryce was the only thing he could truly enjoy. This memory strengthened his desire for a simple life. He long pondered the strange world he had finally entered, and still found all the story's characters incredible. But most of all, without any doubt, he liked Charlie. He quietly smiled to himself, confident that if everything went according to the original script, Alan and his companions would save the world from the demonic threat and start an era of peace. Catching a moment of pure delight, he clenched his fists and suddenly clearly understood. He wanted to see that epicness with his own eyes. Thoughts raced, forming a plan. It was a dangerous world. Demons constantly attacked people, so survival was only possible by force. He decided to use what he knew from games. In them, his own strategy was always one to reach the maximum mark early on to immediately pave an effective and safe path forward. He quickly put everything in order. This by no means meant that he sought to replace the protagonist, Alan. He always respected the original source. Using his own knowledge to his advantage only meant choosing the right place where he could train stubbornly for years and raise his status to the highest levels. He would never forgive if someone altered the original story, even if he himself was to blame. He was perfectly fine just watching from the sidelines as everything unfolded. His impulse was cut off as soon as a colleague returned. Maud was already on site. Silva's face flushed for a moment, his hands involuntarily clenched in excitement, and he exclaimed that the best were the original works. Embarrassed, Maud looked at him and asked what exactly he was talking about. The senior guard grunted, brushing off the strange comment. He suggested having a drink once they finished work. Silva eagerly agreed, gave a thumbs up, and declared that nothing beats beer after a shift. Laughing heartily, Maud noticed how his subordinate was rejoicing and asked if something good had happened. Before he could answer, a desperate cry for help cut through the air. Silva sharply turned his head and froze, trying to understand what was happening. His eyes widened. Within the city walls appeared a monster, a spider-like demon that hissed threateningly. Maud froze, paralyzed by fear. While the other guards rushed to respond, Maud turned to his partner. "What was that, Silva?" he asked. Silva, shaken by fear, instinctively muttered the name of the event, Weddleday. Maud quickly caught himself, stammering, and insisted it was nothing. "But I knew for sure what it was, the Wedge Day, an event once a month that appears before the main story finally truly unfolds. It is a time when demons, who usually never work together, coordinate to attack the kingdom. According to the game script, no significant damage is done during this event, and the hero quickly exterminates the demons, but as soon as the attack began, Maud, the senior watchman, barked orders to his men, restoring order. They had to hold the line until the hero arrived. The creature, a regular level 1 demon, was not very powerful, but even that was too much for an ordinary soldier to defeat. Silva watched as his comrades fought it, but their blades did not inflict noticeable damage on the beast. He thought that pulling the demon out by himself would not be that difficult, but he did not want to sharply alter the picture itself, just to fulfill the duty of the guard and hold back the creature as a gatekeeper. His thoughts were interrupted by Maud's scream. She was struck by pain. The creature had latched on. Silva's gaze hardened. When would the hero finally appear? A second and that's it. Silva was already nearby, asking if he was okay. Maud waved it off, insisting it was just a scratch, but as soon as Silva looked around, the demon had disappeared. Clenching his fists, he cursed the creature for daring to harm Maud and ran away. Seeing the uncharacteristic flash, Maud froze in surprise. She had no idea whether Silva had ever been so quick on his feet before. While the bustle near the city gates had not yet subsided, far from there Charles Orland was resting by a quiet stream, and Alan was playing in the water nearby. Gathering herbs, she decided it was time to regroup with Alan and began pulling on her boots. Her movements froze as suddenly a rustle sounded in the nearby bushes. The rustle immediately caught her attention. Making her way through the dense greenery, she called out and asked if anyone was there. There, Silva rushes swiftly through the forest, pursuing the enemy, already considering the worst. At such speed he could escape in an instant, so it is worth crippling him, cutting off one of his legs. Suddenly his eyes opened wide in shock. He breaks sharply, his gaze fixed on Charles Orland. He stands forward, clearing the way. Silva is paralyzed with shock because he does not understand what she could be doing there at all. His thoughts wildly jump as he tries to pull himself together. With strange clarity he realizes, Charles should not be here. This breaks the game. Panic washes over him in waves as he understands that she faces death, a fate she must not suffer. His fear comes true immediately. Behind Charles from the void emerges a monster, a dark-skinned demon with white hair, who materializes and reaches out a clawed hand to strike. She, screaming in horror, recoils, and Silva roars a challenge, drawing his sword and swearing that this creature will not touch her. He lunges forward sharply and fires a powerful technique, the sword-style Zaylansha, the spinning whip, and everything instantly merges into a blurred motion. The blade cuts into the demon's torso, intercepting the attack just as Charles falls backward. The demon's body sinks to the forced ground, defeated. Silva snatches the sword from his hand, and as soon as the threat passes, Charles sits down nearby, covering her mouth with his hand from relieved shock. When the danger finally disappears, he shifts his gaze to Charles, and concern spreads quietly across his face like a gentle wave. She raises her gaze to him, her cheeks flushed with a blush, and on her face struggles a mixture of gratitude and relief. He rushes abruptly to her and loses his composure. In panic, he anxiously asks if she is okay and if the demon managed to wound her. Charles, still embarrassed, assures her she is fine. He froze in place, the adrenaline was fading, and a clear, sudden horror swept over him like a wave. He realized he had acted at the wrong moment and hoarsely blurted out, "Oh no, I just went and did it like that." The confused bewilderment was interrupted by Charles. He asked who she was. Misunderstanding, he reflexively answered that he was just a guard by the gate. She smiled lightly and clarified. She was not interested in his profession, she wanted to know his name. She leaned closer, and in her eyes was sincere submission, as if asking for the most important thing, "Tell me your name." Such openness made him look away, and a blush crept up his neck. Everything turned out unexpectedly. His life in this scenario being played out by someone sharply went off course. Charles's voice cut through the thoughts while she thanked and exclaimed his name. He finally managed to answer, stammering, "I am Silva." During his service by the castle gates, Silva panics for a moment. He just manages to realize that he has established contact with Charlie. He immediately turns to the woman nearby and explains that this is his post, so he has to go. His thoughts race with anxiety. He recalls that he had no other choice but to defeat the demon in front of her and now fears that this act might shift the plot in some unpredictable direction. While he fusses, the leader Maud calls him by name. The senior guard breaks off the answer, a direct order from the captain of the elite Holy Guard himself. Embarrassed, Silva asks if he heard wrong and inquires if Maud really meant the captain. He throws a grim smile and says, although he does not know what trouble Silva has gotten into, he will take care of his funeral. Silva implores him not to say such evil words. Maud laughs and apologizes but immediately adds a stern warning. The captain of the elite Holy Order of Knights is known to be extremely unyielding. He hopes Silva will be excused with only a reprimand. Soon Silva arrives at the destination, the huge headquarters of the elite Order of Holy Knights. Inside the stone corridors, two knights fully clad in armor accompany him. One hastily confirms that everything is fine and calls out, "Next." When a drop of sweat crawls down behind him and gathers on his temple, he raises his gaze with a firm intention to do everything in his power just to avoid facing her. In the office queue between the bookshelves, a woman in luxurious armor stands and without looking away reads a report. Captain Elite Holy Knights. She stared at the report in her own hands, and her eyes sharply widened in disbelief. Behind outside the window, Silva was seen approaching the office. With a sharp burst of strength, she thrust her hands forward, instantly shattering the window glass and blossoming into a bright, friendly smile. When the door slammed and rattled behind him, Silva stepped over the threshold. The captain greeted him kindly, called him by name. He glanced over her appearance, shining silver hair, blue eyes as deep as the ocean, and a figure he immediately recognized, one of the best in the game. She recognized him immediately, Elda Snow White, captain of the Elite Knights Order. For him, she was also a romantically conquered figure in the world of Briars. Carefully, he asked if she needed him for something. She pouted and grumbled that he was thick-headed, then sharply asked if he really did not understand why he had come. A sharp, terrible realization struck Silva in the head. For some reason, Egdon knew about his true abilities, but the fact that Elda had called him specifically gave him a very bad feeling. His fear was confirmed as soon as her face sharpened. Leaning forward, she blurted out directly, "You are the one who took down the demon, right?" Silva twitched. He was pierced by the very accusation. You pretend not to understand and ask again what she meant. Elda unfolds her thought, recalling the demon attacks from the days and the report about the demon's body found completely torn apart. She continued the logical attack, stating that the demon left traces of defeat from a technique called spinning top. Aside from the hero, the only one who could do that was the captain of the Holy Knights Order, but he was not here. She fixed her gaze on him and demanded, who else could have defeated it? "Let's go." Silence. Eldeline stepped back and firmly said that it was time for him to reduce everything to facts. A person with such a level of skill, she insisted, must dedicate himself to serving the country as a knight. She rebuffs the accusations and emphasizes that it was the hero she deliberately excluded from her circle of questions. Aloud he ponders, what if the demon defeated the hero? But inside him gnaws a single thought: if he confesses, his peaceful life will be completely destroyed. Captain Elda taps her finger on the table and dismisses his theory as naive. She explains, the hero is obliged to report all demon suppressions to the country, but the spider's defeat is still officially unknown. Leaning forward with an overly frank smile, she declares that she will not tolerate this and demands that he accept the situation and join the Knight's Sword. Her face twists in shock and disbelief as he stubbornly continues to refuse. She sharply asks how he can hold on to this denial any longer. From the other end of the room, Silva responds just as sharply. He has no solid evidence for her words. Angrily, she asks why he so stubbornly opposes the idea of joining the Knight Order. And she begins to lay out arguments point by point. Good pay, a bunch of other benefits from a country that will far surpass his current position. He acknowledges her argument but still cannot let go of his doubts. As a knight, he will be forced to carry out missions, back up the hero and protect the country, and even the very thought of such responsibility is incomprehensible to him. He does not waste time and directly says that he does not want to get close to the main heroes. When Elda clarifies what that means, he quickly waves it off, saying nothing, but inside he remains steadfast in his conviction. He has no plans at all to become a knight. Her face hardens, she calls his unwillingness a disgrace. And when she realizes she has failed to convince him, she makes a decision. From now on, she can no longer be picky about methods. Rising from behind the table, the stunned Silva can only watch and does not understand what she means. Silver freezes, his gaze glued to the document that the elite knight captain hands him directly, an acceptance statement and a signature that he fiercely denies having signed himself. He shudders as soon as he realizes she has gone too far, he thinks. As captain of the Order of Knights, she could easily get rid of him for such a forgery. The sinister expression on her face disappears in an instant. She throws the letter aside, says it was just a joke, and that she cannot force people to join without their consent. Then she hands him a scroll rolled into a tube. He takes the new document and asks what it is. The captain explains she will stop calling him to her, but instead she needs his service. On the paper, a sketch of a stranger. She identifies the man as Brajo Bertley, the applicant who seeks to pass the entrance trials for the Knight Order. With a stone face, she directly makes a request. She wants Silva to stop him before he joins. He recognizes the surname and immediately asks if Brajo belongs to the incredibly famous Birdley family. The captain confirms, but her tone is filled with contempt. She calls the man an incorrigible scumbag. She brings to light a difficult situation. Since Brajo is noble, she cannot simply fail him in the trials without facing pressure from the higher-ups. This is where, as she emphasizes, Silva comes into play. She lays out her plan step by step. Silva will fight Brajo in a demonstration duel during the entrance trials. He must defeat him so convincingly that everyone sees Brajo is incapable of joining, and Silva shudders at the realization she is using him for sabotage. She considers the proposal, then asks for confirmation. If he takes her place and does this favor, will she truly stop trying to recruit him into the Knight Order? Her face lights up with a broad, confident smile. She assures that the agreement is exactly that and adds she is counting on him. Within the stone walls of the capital's fortress, a new and troublesome task has fallen heavily on one of its guards. The task trudged through the streets, sighing heavily with anger. They had given him that damn annoying duty. He weighed the delicate balance of his position. Brajo was a character to whom no significance should be attributed, yet he had connections with the Knight Order. Any mistake by Silva could lead to unforeseen consequences and shift the course of events. This realization firmly pinned down his determination. Brajo was unrelated to the main events, and Silva knew almost nothing about him. He would have to gather information. He prepared himself and firmly decided to stick close to the minimum to keep contact with the main characters. He promised himself he would not allow that again. But just then, a light tap on the shoulder broke his concentration. He flinched and sharply turned around. Before him was a familiar face smiling at him. It was Charles Orland. He called him by name Silva. Panic suddenly overwhelmed Umit. He insisted that she shouldn't meet with him, then abruptly recoiled. He got confused, babbled, and assured that he was actually happy they had already met. In his mind flashed their first moment when he finally mustered the courage. But that didn't stop her at all. She reminded him he ran away immediately after saving her, and since then she has been searching for him. Silva tried to justify himself, saying he had urgent matters to attend to. His excuse sounded false even to himself. He covered his face with his palm and apologized sincerely, though in his own way, he simply disappeared without a word. Charles Orland silently watched him. A thoughtful expression froze on her face as she only said, "I see." After that, her gaze sharply intensified. A question that could not be avoided just surfaced in her mind. She began poking him with her finger. "Why do you know my name, Silva?" Startled, he flinched. He is overwhelmed with guilt for lying to Charles. Without wasting a second, he invents a plausible explanation. Supposedly, he was assigned to guard the nobility at a reception and accidentally noticed her name on the guest list. She listens attentively, her face revealing nothing, then asks if that is really true. He can only respond uncertainly, "Well, okay." But as soon as she hears this, she puffs her cheeks in a playful, exaggerated grimace, clearly not quite satisfied with his wooden manner. She says she understands but insists there is no need to be so tense and so formally proper with her. As soon as he tries to object that he can't just, she cuts him off, saying she wants to thank him for what he did. He awkwardly waves off her thanks, insisting it was just fulfilling a soldier's duty. Unmoved, she still insists, declaring she will do everything for him and even help with his work. Then she reveals her true purpose. She is conducting an investigation and wants him to help. A forced smile freezes on her face as if he really has no other choice, and he agrees. In the capital of Zalentia, Silva and Charles arrive in the bustling red light district, a place known to be frequented by members of the Birdie family, one of the most influential noble houses in the country. The informant they meet immediately dismisses all doubts, saying that due to the popularity of this family, gathering information was easy. She recounts rumors about them. It is said that large donations brought them enormous leverage with the royal family, but at the same time they are accused of involvement in slave trading and illegal drug trafficking. Charles grimly absorbs what she hears, glancing sideways at Silva. A faint blush appears on her cheeks as they walk through crowded streets while passers-by avert their eyes. He is confident, based on the collected data, their target is somewhere within these boundaries. Noticing her silence, Charles turns to her and asks what happened. Her face flushes a deep red. Covering her mouth with her hands, she shyly asks him where exactly he plans to take her. His eyes widen in shock as soon as he reads her hint and he panics, starting to deny that she misunderstood everything. She just giggles, admits it was a joke, and adds that she hopes they will find this Brajo very soon. As it turned out, Brajo has a habit of spending extravagantly. He squanders his parents' money every day buying a lot of alcohol and zoning out somewhere in a drunken stupor. They walk down a quieter alley, and the silver wonders glow exactly where such a man usually hangs out. Charles nods. Yes, she knows he is in the red light district, but assumes that maybe they came too early. And at that moment, Silver's stomach lets out a deafening growl. He blushes with embarrassment. He is stunned that the sound betrays him a second before his companion. He apologizes and asks Charles guiltily if she is hungry, maybe she wants a snack. He agrees and decides that they need to find a restaurant with tasty food. Charles admits she is hungry too, and her eyes light up when she points to a nearby place, says it smells so good from there and suggests they visit it. Everything looks as if his advice worked inside. Charles takes a big, truly satisfying bite of a hamburger. On her face is an expression of pure delight. While she eats, Silva watches her closely with a look of surprise on his face. He recalls what he read. Supposedly, the noblewoman likes hamburgers, but now he understands the truth is unexpectedly cute. His observation continues until Charles lowers his gaze and sighs. It's a pity she can never manage to take a good bite. Silva replies that nothing can be done because she has such small hands and mouth. She looks carefully at her food, weighing the problem. After a moment, she decides it's not so bad since she can still eat the bun. And it is from this that she takes her delicate bite-only bread. Silver now understands everything. It seems she usually eats them this way. He is completely overwhelmed by the sight. Her sweetness makes his head spin, and it seems he will simply pass into the afterlife. When they finished eating, Charles thanks him for the meal. Realizing it is already late, she asks where to continue the search. He explains, at night the red light district becomes dangerous, so he decided to continue the investigation alone. His sentence is cut off by a loud knock. Someone demands attention with a shout and slams the door on the table. The interruption is caused by a threatening group led by Brajo. He himself is brutally intimidating, stands up, surrounded by guards in armor. He snorts contemptuously and demands, "Are there any free tables on the second floor?" He had a reputation as a troublemaker. Just yesterday he lost it. He snapped, said the food was taking too long, and threw a glass. He was also known for harassing girls and then flirting with them. This confidence was at full height when he barked at the waitress and asked how they could have no free tables. Loudly stating his own name, Brajo Bertley, as if his mere presence was enough to open the doors. And his female entourage stood aside and looked at the crowded restaurant. His demands escalated. Ignoring the waitress's apologies, he snorted mockingly and asked if she knew who his father was. He insisted if they had no free tables, they should just make one for him. For him, looking at the commotion from their table, Charles confirmed to Silva that this was indeed their target. She noted that he was no better than that complete scoundrel they had heard rumors about, while Silva listened attentively. Supposedly pushing the waitress to the floor, Brajo laughed and called the staff useless trash. He declared he would simply find another restaurant. When Charles was already starting to turn away, he caught Silver's gaze. Silver leaned forward and something thoughtful flashed across her face. Come on, she began slowly, and recognition was heard in her voice. Could it be you? Before she could finish speaking, Brajo hovered over their table, his gaze fixed on her, and a wide, anxious smile blossomed on his face. He addressed her by her full name, Ms. Charles Orland. Silva watched him, and a wary expression never left his face. He leaned even closer, trying to speak friendly. He begged her not to be so cold and insisted that they had recently met at the noble's party. But Charles did not recognize him. She asked if they had met somewhere before. For not being able to remember, Brajo flew into a rage. His face twisted, and he threateningly asked if she really said she did not remember him. Charles closed her eyes and tried to recall, but honestly admitted she could not. Then her gaze sharply broke the silence. Her eyes opened wide with anxiety, and a drop of sweat glistened on her forehead. Brajo's face contorted into a malicious grimace, his eyes wide open with fury. He clenched his fist, and his voice, dripping with poison, hoarsely moved closer, promising, if her memory was really so vague, he would also enjoy the time until she remembered everything. In the tavern, nobleman Brajo flinched like a bird. His eyes filled with deep disgust, and before him stood the young guard Silva with a cold, composed, and determined expression. Regaining his composure, he leaned toward Charles Orland and waved off their place as a dirty back alley. Then he offered to take Silva to an elite restaurant, pointing out on the go that her beauty was known even in high society and that he wanted to get to know her better. The proposal hit Charles's refusal dull. He stated that she was not interested. Silva nearby did not hold back, her face twisted into a tense, malicious smile. The audacity of this man seemed unforgivable to her. She repeated again that she did not care, but Brajo did not back down. He showered invitations to treat her to exquisite food, drinks, and luxurious fruit juices. To this, Charles, with extreme irritation, sighed heavily and cut off that she had not yet reached the age when one could drink. Repeated refusals eventually cracked the charming mask of Brajo. He narrowed his eyes with contempt. Scrutinizing her, he considered that she was just a swan. Everything switched to Silva. He pointed a finger at the guard and asked Charles if he was her protector. But before she could answer, Silva stepped forward and confirmed everything himself. He said that he was the protector of Lady Charles Orland. He was sure that with this statement, he would have the perfect basis to protect her if Brajo suddenly made any unwanted moves. Confused by his sudden statement, Charles looked away, and a faint blush flickered on her cheeks as she tremulously stammered and gave consent. The confirmation drove Brajo into a fit of hysterical laughter. He even snorted at the very idea that a man with such an ordinary face could ever become a bodyguard for a nobleman. The nobleman mocked him and Silva clenched his teeth. A wide, threatening smile spread across his face, and all he could think was how easily one could cut off a man's head. He continues to hurl insults, condescendingly asks if Charles's family lacks people, and offers to lend her one of his own guards. Silva's face darkens, guilt washes over him as soon as he realizes the reason for this public humiliation is his own presence. Cackling ominously, Brajo gestures to summon his own retinue. He boasts that they are all elite bodyguards, former members of the Holy Knights Order selected by his family. As proof of his status, he shows 4 powerful men in heavy armor and asks if they are not perfect to serve him. When they move away from the clash, Charles tells Sylvie it's time to go, but he gets stuck in thought and mutters, not believing his own eyes. Former members of the Holy Knights Order would have surrendered and sold out to someone so pathetic. His loud laughter cuts the ear, and Charles looks around in surprise. Brajo mocks them, hoping they will safely get back to their estate with such a sluggish bodyguard. In response, a confident, barely noticeable smile appears on her lips. She turns around and declares, "The guards of Brajo don't even come close to him." When they are already at a greater distance, she apologizes to Sylvie, admitting that she got angry when they laughed at him. He is surprised. He says he could never have imagined she would get mad for him and that it feels like a blessing. Then he suggests, maybe provoking them is a good idea. He asks if she needs anything from them, although she does not immediately understand what he means. He understands. This is the best moment to gather information about Brajo. As soon as they stay in place, the noble's guards immediately intercept them, and the lead guard declares that he wants to test Charles's bows. She casts a fleeting sideways glance at Himzel and understanding passes between them as they stand against the armored men. Turning his gaze to the guards, Silva calmly accepts their challenge. The chief guard smiles slyly in response, as if to say this is exactly what he wanted to hear. Cracking his knuckles, he issues a demand: let them name everything Brajo is guilty of. A heavy dull blow echoes and the guards, trembling with fear, capitulate, shouting they swear they will tell him everything. He listened, his eyes widened in disbelief as the frightened guard began to speak. The sweaty and trembling man admitted, Brajo's crimes are extensive and there is more to add. He listed a series of axling counterfeit drugs, blackmail and physical assaults, confirming them with the nobleman's own words that he is still a villain. Beck, one of Brajo's men, presses a knife to Silva's throat and shows the plan of his master. Having passed the initial trials, Brajo intends to find leverage on the captain to take full control of Knight's Order. Silva instantly understands. Brajo's intention is to subordinate the order to himself and make it result in danger for the city's inhabitants and fuel corruption throughout the country. So he is obliged to intervene and foil this plan. Now he stands over the fallen guards. He says he will not report their loss, gives the order to return to their master and bring a fabricated story of victory, and not utter a single word about what really happened. After that, Charles Orland approaches and addresses him. Silva, she notices. An ordinary soldier could not have erased the demon so easily, so she simply asks how he became so strong. He turns to her with a broad smile and happily explains that it was tough training. For many years, he says, he hid in the mountains. He explains this place is teeming with monsters, and every day he nearly died. That's why he became so strong. Seeing Charles's worried expression, he quickly reassures her. She doesn't need to resort to such dangerous methods. He smiles warmly and stakes his life on the confidence that Charles will become even stronger even without any trials. Touched by his firmness, he replies, if he feels that way, then she will trust him. Having settled everything, they set off together. Silva says he is hungry and suggests finding a place to eat, so Charles jokingly asks if he has already been cured. Late that night, the tower stands out as a dark silhouette against the starry sky. Charles's voice is heard. He confirms that of course she will heal after all nerds are obliged by the rules to take care of their pets. The day of the entrance trials for the Order of Knights arrives. It is announced. The 127th trials start with the first exam, a simulated fight. One-on-one fights will be determined by lot, and the winners will advance further. Holding the message in his hands, Silva steals determination from it, firmly deciding to stop Brajo before he makes the order his own. He did not expect to encounter his target so quickly. Brajo burlily pointed with a sharpened finger and recognized in him the burly guard he had seen before. Silva did not deviate from his course, only greeted and even surprised himself. Brajo is here too. The nobleman laughed and disdainfully said he could say the same. He claimed that his guard reported the outcome of their meeting and that Silva should have been beaten well to learn a lesson. But at the same time, he noticed Silva did not look injured at all. Knowing with a smile, he explained that he had just gone to church for a healing potion. It cost him a considerable sum. And even before adding a cutting remark, supposedly Brajo is hardly capable of affording such a thing, he couldn't resist. Brajo exploded with rage in response to the insult and mockery at just the mention of healing potion. He gesticulated broadly, praising his own shining armor and declaring it top-tier equipment made from extremely rare orichalcum. As soon as he finished, the official voice called and their names. Brajo, Birdie, and Silva were ordered to appear in the middle of the training ground. The fact that they would have to become opponents drove Brajo into a fit of mocking laughter. He declared that Silva was a loser and could not believe such luck. Silva simply calmly acknowledged what had happened. "You are right, Sir Brajo." Turning to the trial examiner, he asked what the consequences for killing an opponent would be. The examiner answered directly, "Such an act leads to disqualification." For a moment, a false relief flashed in Brajo and he looked at Silva again, ordering the soldier from the crowd, as if he had literally slipped away. And with a malicious smile, he decided to continue. "Well then," he shouted. He lunged forward with his sword raised and roared, "Here I am." The charge broke off halfway. With a barely noticeable flick of his finger, Silva sent Brajo's sword ringing to the side. It slipped from his hand. Brajo froze in disbelief, stumbling, floundering in words. Silva casually said, as if his hand had simply slipped, supposedly Brajo was lucky to slip away by a hair. Then he mentally considered, would a strong enough blow be enough to kill this Mainvin in his armor? Then he put forward the idea. What if we attack Brajo the same way? Confused, Brajo shot back that his first move was just a hand decap away to let Silva make the first move. And he declared that now he would allow Silva the first strike. With a confident smile, Silva accepted the offer. He said that Brajo's hand was already numb, so he wouldn't be able to swing the sword anyway. Then with a sudden move struck. The hit threw Brajo far across the training ground and he rolled through the dust. He loomed over the fallen opponent, who, trying to defend at least some dignity, shouted that it all happened only because he stumbled. Silva coldly and scrutinizingly examined this pitiful excuse. He remarked in an even tone, "Yes, it really looked like Brajo just stumbled." But these words made his opponent even angrier, and he sharply fired back that he had not yet unleashed his full strength. Brajo, boiling with anger, accused him of relying solely on pure luck and announced the decision, finally to end the match. The fight he stubbornly claimed he had never won at all. As soon as the sword flashed, Silva simply watched from the other side of the air, inascently acknowledging that it was a threat. Instead, he placed his palm on the pommel of his own sword. A soft gleam burst from the blade, and he quietly invoked magical enhancement. This technique was the basic application of magic directing internal mental energy. The power poured into the body made a person resilient like steel. And when it was filled with a weapon, an ordinary sword became sharp enough to easily cut iron. His thoughts turned to the reason for such strength. Demon-sentient enemies of humanity had bodies much stronger than any mortals. They had to withstand their onslaught. To become a true hero, one had to freely control magic. It was a power that many people lived their whole lives with and never felt it, let alone managed to grasp it. Silver silently and confidently identifies the enemy's armor. It is made of orichalc. Without it, he is no match for them. Suddenly, the guard is overwhelmed by excessive pressure. Brajo Bertley sweats and begins to tremble. He stammers, asking how Silver changed so suddenly and what he is planning to do. She sneers, reminding Brajo that he is the one who must attack. After all, he himself says, "You won't win a duel if you don't strike first." In fear, he writhes and recoils, accusing Silver of a conspiracy to kill him. Aloud, he concludes that some petty nobleman hired a guard for a laughable wage, and as soon as he utters "bottom feeders," Silver's face instantly hardens. Confirmation that Brajo was talking about Charles makes the nobleman shudder. Inside, Brajo notes, Silver is completely different, as if he has become another person. Locking eyes with Silva, Brajo is convinced the guard truly intends to kill him. In desperate panic, he changes tactics and offers to hire Silva himself with his own money. He continues to beg, promising huge sums, more than Charles could ever pay, and even willing to offer women just for Silva to give in. Unwavering, Silva only asks if he is truly ready and warns not to move if he values his life. From this, Brajo bursts into a scream of fear. One last desperate move, Brajo offers beautiful women, even better than Charles. But this becomes a terrible mistake. Silva meets him with furious twists and rage, growling for Brajo to be silent and never utter her name again. His fury surges like a wave and he bursts forward, unleashing powerful technique. Dzelian Sea Sword style, White Waterfall. The blade flashes in the air, striking Brajo with incredible speed and force. The blow dully claps with a sharp clang. Brajo is still standing surprised, silent, unable to move until a clean cut appears on the armor plate across his chest. The metal piece cracks, detaches, and begins to fall away. With the last thud, the severed armor rattles against the ground. Brajo exclaims in complete astonishment, cannot comprehend how his armor, forged from orichalcum, could have been destroyed. In the center of the stone arena, Silva stands over the fallen opponent. He sinks to the ground and chokes on words, begging for surrender. Silva confirms the capitulation, then quietly exhales with relief. Yes, the mission was accomplished, only left to report to Elde. From the observer, Elde gives a small, satisfied smile to touch her lips as she proclaims his victory. Nearby, one fully armored guard can only freeze in stunned silence, and unbelieving mutters the name Silva. An anxious hum from the hall makes him turn around. He glances at the stands and at that moment his facial expression changes. He sees a noisy crowd and a feeling of fear washes over him. A sudden anxious thought struck him, he might attract too much attention to himself. In her office, Captain Elda sits at the table with a satisfied face. She turns to the guard in front of her and says that thanks to his efforts, they managed to prevent Brajo from joining their order. Next, their eyes closed and her voice a quiet determination. She promises they will gather ironclad evidence of Brajo's brutal crimes to put him behind bars. All his offenses are unforgivable, says Elda, and thanks Silva once again. The phrase hardens an iron determination emerges in it. Clenching his fist, Silva tells the captain she can count on him. After that, Eider reminds him of their promise. It's time to make Brajo pay for insulting Charlie. Then she reports that since he helped foil Brajo's plans, she will no longer invite him to Knight's Order. His face immediately lights up a broad, relieved smile. He sincerely thanks, overwhelmed with joy that his peaceful days will finally return. Elda looks at him somewhat surprised. She understands that he is completely serious and does not want to join. Her surprise instantly turns to distrust, her eyes fill with tears. She presses him to herself, questioning if he is truly, genuinely sure. Not a second of hesitation, Silva confirms he is absolutely certain and he does not care about it in the slightest. Her composure shatters completely. She pounds the table with her fists. Enda literally bursts into tears and hysteria, shouting that he must work for her like a knight and frantically demands, why doesn't he want to? She sobs that she wants him to be near. Silva freezes and suddenly realizes this is a promise of a completely different kind than the one he would have imagined. He watches her cry and thinks he could not have predicted that everything would turn into an event in the spirit of a spoiled Bratelda. He signs the documents, remembering that he must keep his promises, so he hands her a handkerchief. She takes the fabric, sobs, and thanks him, promising to wash it and return it. While tears still flow, she squeezes his hand and begs him to at least continue doing his job as a gatekeeper. Breaking free from that, Silva walks away alone, deciding to lay low for now. Behind him, two other guards watch him go. One says Silva looks like an ordinary street gang member, nothing like what they had heard. He eavesdrops on a conversation between two guards. One recalls another vision of the demon third this month. Sylvie manages only to keep silence on her face, but her gaze reveals restrained concern. These news trouble him. From his post, he glances at the city and exhales heavy rise of demonic activity gnaws from within, and he wonders if it is somehow connected to the main story that is about to begin. He sits down, feeling, lately he has attracted too much attention. He can only hope that these new events will not hit the plot too noticeably. He has to think that since Alan is the main hero, a happy ending for this world is almost guaranteed. His thoughts briefly paint Alan as a triumphant, heroic figure. As soon as he freezes in these images, his thoughts shatter from a sudden loud click nearby. He sharply turns his head, shudders, and a drop of sweat appears on his temple. He sharply raises his hand as something lands with incredible force, scattering dust and debris. Through the haze, he sees a woman smiling from above and his breath catches as a sudden guess comes to him who it might be. The figure is revealed, dark decorated clothing, sheaths, and the weapon sorter. She looks down at the stunned guard lying on the ground. "Here you are," she speaks, addressing him by name, Silva. Then with a confident smile, she introduces herself, Special Great Hero Kaguya. Her dramatic arrival instantly draws a crowd. Passers-by begin to whisper they recognize the famous Lady Kaguya and immediately wonder what such a special great hero is doing there. When Silva tries to quietly slip away, keeping contact with the main characters to a minimum, Kaguya leans in very close. With a barely squinting gaze, whispering, "Darling, I've been looking for you forever." Before he can come to his senses, she suddenly wraps her arms around him from behind a tight, strong embrace. "Where do you think you're running off to, leaving your dear wife behind?" she asks, while the frightened guard silently screams for help. He still couldn't move. Kaguya held him tightly in her arms. Meanwhile, she introduced herself without hesitation as a conquering figure of love who appeared suddenly. And most importantly, the only hero who was ever given the title Special Grade. She boasted of her exceptional skill in both magic and swordsmanship to the point that once, laughing, she tore a level 4 demon in half. Essentially, Kaguya proclaimed herself the ultimate weapon of humanity. Then she leaned even closer and called herself a real monster. And also, as a verdict, confessed, just like Elda, she knows about his true abilities. That, Kaguya explained, was what made her so fixated on him. And although she assumed that Alan was his soulmate, she was convinced otherwise. They were connected not by fate in some defined sense. Fate itself brought them together. Stunned, he tried to shift the conversation off track. He suggested she forget about him and focus on her own duties as a hero. But she countered with logic. Recently, demon activity has sharply increased. She instantly brushed off that thought, declaring that such duties did not interest her. Being with him, Kaguya insisted, was a much more attractive prospect. His eyes widened sharply in shock. He could not understand how a person with her title could allow herself to treat her own duties so contemptuously. When he tried to object that he did not remember them ever becoming a married couple, she moved closer and clicked the zipper on her jacket, and declared that, of course, she had the right to be with him. After all, she was his wife. While she excitedly described their wedding ceremony, he felt as if the words were hitting a brick wall, although somewhere in the background, he still admitted that her proposal somehow attracted him. Unfazed, Kaguya suddenly suggested visiting an interesting cafe she had found to spend quality time together as a couple. A couple of seconds, and he didn't even have time to respond properly. She squeezed his hand and pulled him away, and all his protests about their marital status simply dissolved into complete silence. Meanwhile, at the Holy Knights Order headquarters, Elda sat at a desk reviewing a report. Her face hardened each time she finished reading another piece of news. Holy Knights had again failed to capture the cursed demon. She stands in her office, and in her soul only one name breathes: Silva. Disappointment flares up as she replays an old failure. If only he were nearby, everything would have turned out differently. A sharp crack of fist hits the table. After the outburst, she approaches the window, crosses her arms, and looks down at the city lost in memories. Her gaze catches on a small, folded wallet on the windowsill, and it is he who returns her to the very heart of her thoughts. She suddenly remembers he was strange. Even now, in such a difficult situation, she somehow feels drawn to wait for him to do something incredible. Consciousness sharply throws her back onto the chaotic battlefield. The desperate cry of the night cuts the silence. The hero was taken away. It was the statement that is terrifying to utter on the battlefield but still understandable. There were too many enemies. A gigantic horned demon held the fallen hero. She took command and ordered everyone to retreat while she bought them time. Time was running out. She knew reinforcements had already been called and Kaguya was on the way. But considering the injury, she wondered how much longer she could hold on. Until Kaguya arrived, she decided to fulfill her duty anyway, to personally thin out the demons to reduce losses. The fight was exhausting. She thought, if these were just level 1 demons, she could handle it even with the injury. But against level 2, it was too heavy a burden. A sharp blow and a sharp pain spreads throughout her body. The demon's tusked hand pierces deep into her side. She grits her teeth, suppressing the fierce pain, and firmly renounces self-sacrifice in her thoughts. She is not going to sacrifice herself for nothing. A faint light barely flickers through her armor. She lunges forward with a sweeping attack cutting across the horned demon's chest. He only grimaces in a smile, not at all embarrassed, ignoring the beast. She rushes past, exhausted but stubborn, to reach her comrades. The demon growls, telling her that it won't be so easy. He tears through the air, trying to intercept a terrifying scene next to her, knights trembling with horror. She clearly remembered that day. He was not a knight in shining silver armor. Instead, he wore battered steel and simple boots. Yet it was he who stood and looked the demon straight in the eyes. She began to shout a warning. He cut her off and said that they hadn't even reached the main event yet. With that, he rushed forward, swinging his sword and wildly shouting incomprehensible gibberish. Elda could only watch, wondering if his efforts were in vain. But Kaguya, who was also there, saw it differently. The elder recalled how he looked at that very moment and thought, In all the nights she had ever seen, he was the most beautiful of all. The memory faded. Returning to the present, Elda explained to Sylvie. Since that very day, she had been relentlessly asking him to join the sacred order of the night festival. And with slight irritation, she added each time he denied himself that opportunity. She grabbed him by the collar, and her voice pressed with calm confidence. He was given power precisely to protect this world. The next day, Elda arrived at the attack site. During the night watch, she was met with surprise. No one expected her to come personally. The knight reported there are 2 victims. He explained that it looked like the tricks of a cunning demon. Almost no traces were left, and he concluded they would have to call Sir Hero. She confirmed that she had already asked him to come, but since they did not know the target, they decided to prioritize the investigation. She ordered to continue the night report, and he acknowledged it. She further said that both victims were women. There were bite marks on the bodies, and it seemed as if their blood had been completely drained. In the absence of other clues, he assumed the demon was probably already above level 3. Elda's face hardened as she absorbed this grim news, and it became clear in her mind how terribly everything had turned out. Before her was a complete ruin, bodies scattered on the floor, crumpled into a chaotic heap. Clothes were torn to shreds and faces were frozen in silent screams. A dead testimony of a brutal demon attack. Clenching her fist in anger, she turned to the knight beside her. She ordered him to relay the message to the other knights and immediately summoned Gateguard Silva to the knight's command headquarters. Then her voice sharply rose. She raised all the holy knights and soldiers to combat readiness and commanded the scout squad to immediately expand the search radius. Surrounded by armored guards, Kaguya leans closer to Silva, and the excitement from their first mission together bursts out. She even calls him darling. Silva seems constrained by embarrassment. He orders her to stop calling him that. Inside, he bitterly laments the situation. Yesterday was already difficult. Kaguya kept following him around, and now he was tasked with investigating the demon attack. He feels that he has truly cornered himself in a damned dead end. After a time shift back a few hours during a briefing with Elite Knight Captain Elda, Silva asked her about the vampire, and she confirmed her inquiry. He clarifies, vampire is a popular nickname given to the culprit of the demonic attack that happened recently. Continuing the report, she says there were 2 victims. Their bodies were found completely exhausted without a single drop of blood, and clear bite marks were visible on the neck. Turning to the present time, Silva aloud wonders what Kaguya is doing here. She presses against his hand, smiles, and declares that she does as she pleases and that it has nothing to do with the captain, while he looks at them with a stern expression. Swift acts sharply. Elda slaps Kaguya's hand away from Silva and shouts that the lascivious one wants to free herself from him. She pushes Kaguya back and repeats the demand again. As if nothing happened, Kaguya calmly explains that she just connected with him by the elbows. Pagya calls the captain. He freezes tensely. Elda sharply replies she is in a serious conversation. You pull yourself together, muttering quietly under your breath, and already with a firm tone declare that they need to get to the plan and return to the right course. She begins to lay out the details of their goal. The probable cause of the demonic attack was an evolutionary hemorrhage, a creature capable of transforming into a human likeness. That is why it still could not be found. And also its power level was assessed as over 3. Elda turns to Silva and notes, a level 3 demon is a difficult opponent even for skilled knights. A stubborn look and dry confidence in her voice. This is his time to shine. From those words, a burden of responsibility falls on him. He awkwardly salutes and admits his doubts. He is just a gatekeeper. He objects, honestly believing that his limit is running errands. But Elda is not worried. She says they currently lack people, and they will be grateful for his help in the investigation even if he acts independently. Her proposal to act independently made him freeze for a moment. He stubbornly glanced cautiously at the 2 women, and Kaguya quickly asked what happened. Gathering his thoughts a little, he clarified, he has a question and it must be asked first. His eyes narrowed, his gaze became even sharper as he looked directly at Elda. He roughly asked if she had hidden motives, and by this gave a task, as if undressing the truth with his gaze. The question hit the mark, but it stunned her. She even choked on embarrassed laughter, waved her hands. No, nothing like that. Of course, she was not trying to launch some grand plan and certainly did not expect that by helping the investigation, he would earn the respect of others. And then it would be easier for her to officially invite him to join Knight Sword. Her nervous laughter still hung in the room, and he was silent for a second, after which he dryly pointed out that she had just spewed out all the details of her supposedly secret conspiracy. He sighed. Now everything fell into place. He said that usually he cannot refuse an order for a simple investigation, but he will accept this one. But before he could finish speaking, Kaguya suddenly appeared nearby, cheerfully announced that if he is going to help, she will join too. The unexpected statement threw him off balance. The captain slammed her palm on the table with all her might, protesting. "Wait, Kaguya," she exclaimed and insisted. "Without her participation, everything will be ruined." But Kaguya was not at all embarrassed. She said she didn't care about the plan. She just wanted to go with Silva. The captain could only sigh heavily in frustration. She let out an irritated sigh but eventually gave in. "All right," she agreed, admitting that they needed all the help they could get. Looking at both of them with renewed authority, she ordered them to appear at the upcoming meeting regarding the investigation, where they would be thoroughly informed about the whole situation. Sylvan knocks on the heavy door before pushing it open. He enters the room and announces their presence, while Kaguya walks almost shoulder to shoulder beside him. Their appearance immediately draws the attention of the gathered knights. A wave of silence and whispers rolls through the hall. The men whisper among themselves, "Who is that unknown warrior?" Gazes quickly shift as soon as they recognize the woman beside him. The whisper spreads, "Why does such a special great hero like Lady Kaguya always stay paired with a simple soldier?" Eventually, they decide it must be Captain Elda's orders. But Kaguya just closes her eyes. A barely noticeable, understanding smile touches her lips as she basks in the attention. The whisper echoes in the spacious briefing hall, where a large round desk awaits the attendees in the center. Silva and Kaguya stand together, noticeably apart from the other knights who continue whispering among themselves. In the briefing room, Kaguya approaches the table where several knights are seated, among them a surprised Silva. With a bright smile, she asks if she can sit with them. Silva stammers but immediately agrees. Kaguya thanks him and sits down. She leans forward slightly, a playful spark flashes in her eyes, and Kaguya quietly laughs so much so that they definitely start looking at them. Silva secretly pulls his thoughts together and immediately corrects himself. After all, he is the one gathering the attention. Everyone is already seated around the large round table. The night watchman announces, "The investigation of the vampire attack at the gathering begins." He starts simply and concisely, briefly summarizing the known facts for the group. They need to organize what they already know and take 2 victims as a starting point. Both are in their 20s, and their bodies were found in the northern part of the capital. While they are told the gruesome details, Maud rages and curses the worthless demons responsible for everything. Nearby, Silva listens and it dawns on him. Such a specific case of attack has never occurred in the main history of Breas. He processes this new data and concludes, if this is a deviation, then the main heroes will not enter the fight, which means the matter will likely resolve itself. These thoughts wash over him like a wave of nervous relief. He steals a glance sideways at Kaguya and sees that she has closed her eyes. Apparently, she managed to doze off during the briefing. He instantly reproduces the conclusion of the meeting. They will expand the search area and organize night patrols. He and Kaguya were assigned responsibility for the eastern gates. As soon as he receives new orders, he turns to his partner and cheerfully announces that it's time to go scout. He calls her by name but suddenly shudders. She is still asleep, showing no sign of waking. He intently gazes at her sleeping figure, and on his face freezes an expression of absolute distrust as he seriously mutters. He approached the tall, stern-faced knight and offered help, forcing a nervous smile. The knight looked him up and down stone-faced and sharply demanded to say which group he was assigned to. As soon as Silva voiced the answer, the knight exploded with irritation. People began to doubt Captain Eld's decision. He could not understand why the special grade hero was paired with a private from the Eastern Gates Guard Regiment. Then he, having lost his composure, declared that Kaguya should join his unit, the Second Holy Order of the Night. The motive immediately became clear to Silva. The man was trying to lure the hero away to claim the glory for himself. Night drew closer, her voice croaked sharply, warned Silva for her audacity. Unmoved, Silva calmly replied that the decision was not for the knight. His anger grew. The knight seemed to nod towards the sleeping Kaguya and ordered Sylvie to immediately get out of the investigation, stating that it was far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary soldier. When Silva just began to explain that he was acting under the direct order of the captain of the First Holy Knight's Order, the man lunged forward and grabbed him by the collar, shouting that they were the Second Holy Knight's Order and did not recognize the authority of the First. The subordinate watched nervously, feeling that his leader was going too far. The man pushed Silva back and roared that the honorable members of the Second Order cannot tolerate being outdone by the First in anything. But suddenly his subordinates trembled and flurried convulsively, trying to warn their leader. Someone was behind him. A cold voice sliced through the air, commanding it to be silent. The knight seemed to freeze. A drop of sweat glistened on his forehead, and he, confused, looked around. Standing on the table, Kaguya, her eyes blazing with fury, stared straight at herself. She cast a reproach. How dare the knight raise a hand against her beloved? Dark energy swirled around her, and Silva just freed frozen surprise and begged her to calm down. She vanished into a blur. Her sea of katana flashed, and the blade with a deafening crack struck the armor of the second commander. Silva, caught off guard, only managed to shout her name in complete disbelief. The blow shattered the massive knight so much that he fell heavily to the floor. Standing over his fallen body, Kaguya raised her hand a cold gaze and a short, unequivocal command to the stunned onlookers. Stay back. Smiling with satisfaction, Kaguya clenched her fist while the knights she stopped lay defeated on the ground. She snorted disdainfully, reproaching their audacity and inclination to touch her husband. Silva froze in shock, unable to believe that, as a special great hero, she just said that. Kaguya turned to him and slyly winked, apologizing for not holding back. He remained stunned, just staring, overwhelmed by her instant action. He tries to leave but turns back to her sudden use of magic and claims that it is harmful to his heart. She, however, seems to fall out of reality into a trance and quietly sighs with satisfaction. How romantic a night patrol. She turns to him with a radiant smile, justifies her actions, and slyly asks, "Isn't it natural for a wife to protect her husband, especially since Salem attacked him?" He admits that she saved him but mutters that she went too far. Kaguya, with a self-satisfied smile, waved off his complaints and essentially clarified, "So what is there to boast about that she protected him?" She notices his listless expression and says he looks uncertain. Silva can only respond with a tired sigh. The man insists that she is not lying when she speaks of her love. She in turn names what exactly she loves in him, his habit of caring for people and how playfully he teases her. Her face softens and sincerity finally breaks through in her voice. Above all, as she confesses, is his true strength which he keeps from everyone. She loves all of that in him. He looks away, doubting that there will ever be a chance to go all in. Leaning in very close, Kaguya gently touches his cheek with her fingertip and says she wants to see it someday. Then she seems to take off into the air right in front of him, a small smile playing on her face. She thinks that responsibility is an inseparable part of strength, but at the same time pretends she knows nothing about it. And below, Silva remains alone with her words, quietly repeating one thing in his mind: responsibility. She stood next to Kaguya under the night sky, tilting her head up. She called his name, looked at the dazzling full moon, and said he was incredibly beautiful. His gaze followed her gaze, snatched from the darkness what she saw. Before asking his actual question, he agreed with her assessment and only then began to unravel in his mind the origin of these words. Kaguya turned to him, her face stern, and put forward a hypothesis. If she said she was born right from the moon itself, would he believe such a story? The question painfully struck Kaguya's memory. She remembered the time when she was still a child. She was chosen as a vessel for a secret research aimed at gathering the magic of the moon. Dark figures watched her, and one of them knew her true nature. But the magic drawn from the moon made her the strongest, but at the cost of her own tears. Returning to the present, Kaguya came across Silva's instant and sincere response. Without hesitation, he confirmed that he would believe her, and this completely threw her off balance. His surprise melted away and a warm, relieved smile flashed across her face. Kaguya quietly laughed, happy that he believed her, and calmly said, "Thank you." Then he explained his logic. If you believe that she is from the moon, it will only make the very idea of her even more romantic. His unexpected explanation threw Kaguya off balance. Froze speechless. The romantic echo touched her thoughts, and she stood motionless, a blush creeping across her cheeks as she tried to process his words. Her composure crumbled at home. Embarrassed, she poked him with her finger and declared that he was finally acting shy, and in a joking tone also accused him of emotional abuse, saying he was teasing his wife like that. Calmly and very directly, he reminded her. In fact, she was not his wife. A sharp personal remark, said bluntly, seemed to hit him unexpectedly. He cut off the phrase and only then realized that the words were chosen inappropriately. His thoughts were interrupted just as an unfamiliar scent drifted down the street. His face tightened with suspicion. He and Kaguya stood alone in a quiet alley, and the strange aroma instantly triggered his full alertness. The smell was immediately pierced by a piercing scream somewhere deep in the city. Silva looked back and called Kaga when he confirmed he heard it too. Barely had they moved toward the sound when a sharp realization clicked in him. He knew this smell. Before he could voice his guess, Kagith suddenly staggered. Pain roared in her throat as she clutched her stomach. Her face twisted in agony and disgust as she recognized the source of the stench. "This is filth from demons," she hissed. In a dark alley, Alan and Kaguya come across a terrifying scene. A hooded figure looms over a fallen night watchman. Angry, Alan demands an explanation of what is happening and, drawing his sword, rushes forward. The attacker moves with unnatural speed, jumps onto the nearest wall and rushes away into the night. Watching the figure disappear, Alan curses his own momentary hesitation. He instantly shifts his attention to the victim, quickly runs up, crouches, and checks how he is. Bent down on his knees, Alan exhales with relief. The elite knight captain is still breathing. Kaguya turns to her and asks if she can take the captain to the medical station. He states that he intends to go in search of the demon. He doesn't care, but she still asks if he can handle the chase on his own. He calmly assures, "Don't worry, let everything be on him." As soon as the decision is made, he activates the skill. The body bursts with power. Jumping into the sky and uttering the magical enhancement, he rushes across the rooftops under the full moon, leaping from one to another. His gaze cuts through the darkness and instantly locks onto the target. He found him. He squeezes out maximum speed, tears through roofs, flies to the edge, and shouts for the figure to stop. The assassin is incredibly fast, but Alan is already closing the distance. Suddenly, the assassin's cloak dissolves into a swarm of creatures, incessantly fluttering their wings. Alan freezes in place, stunned by the unexpected appearance of the bloodbath swarm. He burst through the crowd, slicing through the bloody swarms as they rushed headlong at him, and grunted with effort, and suddenly it became clear. There were incredibly many of them here, and they kept pestering him without pause. In the fight flashed a thought. Could this cursed demon control his own servants? Invisible to Alan, another young man with an intelligent gaze watched the clash and recognized the technique as the sword style of Valencia. He put the style into practice and unleashed a wild, furious lunge, one that pierced through the bats. The hooded figure recoiled, and the truth suddenly revealed itself to Alan. All eyes were fixed on the target, and he fired, finally catching up. The gloomy hooded figure clenched his face, and irritation flashed through his hidden features. Leaving Alan's pursuit alone, the assassin took off running, but the bloody clashes that remained again swarmed him. "Stop!" he roared, and fierce frustration boiled over. Having no choice, he used his power. The sword flared with dazzling light. The dark-haired swordsman shouted, abruptly launched into an attack, and as soon as the blade struck the target, the hooded assassin dissolved into a swarm of shadowy, bat-like figures, and a sharp whipping sound rolled through the alley. He watched as the last of the figures, the only bat-like shadow, disappeared, flying across the full moon. Standing alone, he drew his sword, but with regret realized the target had slipped away. The night watch is coming to an end. The swordsman heads to the local clinic, its windows casting warm light into the darkness. Inside, Kaguya meets him and asks if he came empty-handed. Sitting on a bench, the swordsman apologizes for letting the creature escape, but confirms he saved someone's life with something called hemonitic. After that, Kaguya asks if he sustained any injuries. He lowers his gaze and admits it was a mistake to chase alone. Kaguya tells him not to blame himself. He hears her words, raises his eyes, and smiles faintly, noticeably exhaling with relief. She reflects, if this creature managed to escape him, then no one else would have had a chance. Then her gaze stops on a piece of dark fabric in his hand, as if on a hook. He carefully examines the fabric, and his determination strengthens as he vows, next time he will catch her. Haja beams and finds her renewed motivation so sweet. The swordsman, embarrassed by her praise, turns away and shyly asks her to stop. When they leave the clinic, he contemplates their plight. The search for demons has reached a dead end, perhaps someone is protecting them. He makes a decision. These exhausted demons will soon strike again, so they must be stopped before new victims appear. He looks up. Kaguya is sitting on the neighboring roof humming a melody. He calls her up and explains that his only clue is a piece of cloth stained with demon blood. Looking intently at her, he decides to take a risk with a long shot and asks Kaguya to try smelling the fabric. He stretched out a piece of cloth and asked if she could track the demon by its scent. He recalled her previous claim that she could recognize such odors, but Kaguya just froze and stared back at her, embarrassed. She clarified, yes, she is sensitive to the smell of demons, but her nose is not sharp enough to track them. She shuddered at the very hint, and she firmly stated that she is not a dog, even though he stubbornly insisted that he could count on her. Her words crushed his hopes. He sank in despair, muttering that his brilliant idea ultimately yielded nothing. Seeing his depression, Kaguya's face suddenly changed. A fiery determination flashed in her eyes, and cat ears suddenly grew on her head. She declared that if that was his wish, she would do everything to fulfill it. And she added that as a wife, it was her duty to be by his side. She could become a cat for him, or even a dog. Her fiery proposals grew one after another. She promised to lick his boots or even take off her clothes. The swordsman Silva barely recovered from her pressure when he shouted for her to stop, insisting that he was the one who would apologize. The new arrival interrupted the scuffle. Charles Orland, calling Sylvie, sharply asked what exactly they were doing. She sighed in response. She was looking for him and proudly announced that she had passed her written exams with distinction. She made a swift gesture and energetically raised her thumb, sincerely admiring the achievement. Meanwhile, Kaguya watched the newcomer intently with a sharp, competitive gaze, quietly sizing her up. Who she was and how to approach the rivalry as if it had already flared between them. Charles was surprised to realize that Kaguya did not recognize her, so he explained that she was a student of the Guar Academy. Silva immediately introduced Kaguya as her friend and hesitantly confirmed it. But the name struck Charles's ear. He suddenly realized he was speaking with a legendary hero of a special class. Kaguya flinched from surprise and mentally noted that some pathetic candidate for hero just like her had slipped below Kaguya's level. Gathering courage, Charles told Kaguya that she sounded full of promise and added that the honor of their conversation was a rare thing. Silva watched with admiration. The troubled expression on Charles Orland's face changed to a hurried closeness. He approached Kaguya, whose hand nervously trembled and touched her lips. Then she directly asked what kind of relationship Kaguya had with Silva. That guy barely smiles and teases, as if Charles thought Silva was lonely. And she at full speed plays up the pathos and theatrically declares that she is his wife, the most beautiful and tender in the whole world. After these words, Silva panics. He desperately realizes that now Charlie will also be dragged into this dispute. Charlie sighs with relief for a moment. Well, maybe it will be possible to resolve the misunderstanding. But the shock from the fact that Charlie very quickly begins to get jealous overwhelms him again. To Charles, he is thrown into confusion where to even begin the explanation. She looks at him intently with distrust and asks if they are just business partners. He sharply confirms, Kaguya is only a friend and right now they are indeed business partners, but her words about being his wife are pure self-proclamation. He continues, explaining. They plan to go on patrol together due to a series of vampire attacks that have been ongoing recently. Charles's interest sharpened. She says that news about the vampire case is going around the academy and declares that she also wants to help. Kaguya meets her with the same indulgent smile and asks what exactly Sila's friend can do. Irritated, Charles replies, she can be useful, and does not understand why Kaguya insists so much on the word friend. To prove this, Charles claps his hands. Bright light bursts from the ground around her as soon as she gives the order and suddenly her master appears. From her call behind her emerges the spectral figure of a huge wolf. Fenra wolf, she exclaims. Kaguya notices. On her face is genuine interest, for she recognizes the summoning spell as a marvelous work of magic. Summoned wolf gently licks her cheek. Charles explains, her elemental magic allows her to summon spirits she controls at any time. She introduces the being Finra, a wolf spirit whom she briefly calls Ruru. While she stood next to the newly named spirit, Silver noted, what a cute name, Ru. He remarked that elemental magic is considered an almighty skill, invaluable both in battle and for reconnaissance. The wolf just quietly barked in response, and this immediately caught Silver's attention. She explained that Ruru has been her companion since childhood. Silva was genuinely surprised and frankly said, the spirit is usually wary of everyone except her. She reached out her hand and he froze. The wolf spirit allowed the touch. At that moment he realized what it meant, remembered how even Alan could only pet Ruru after their bond with Charles reached the absolute limit. The spirit responded with pure joy and rolled onto its back. Like Charles cued near the crutch stand, Silva readily agreed and began to pet the wolf's belly. But Hagya did not get a warm welcome. The wolf spirit did not move and growled threateningly, protecting itself. She puffed out her cheeks irritably and mentally waved it off. Rude animal. Charles only smiled quietly and explained that such caution is normal and Silva is the exception. Talking about her spirit's practical skills, she said that Ruru can detect and track demons by scent. Once the wolf picks up the smell, finding the target is easy. Silva immediately seized the idea and asked if Ruru could track a demon by its trail if the scent was taken from a piece of cloth. Testing the theory in practice, she handed the wolf a piece of cloth to sniff. Ruru instantly sniffed intently, then let out a sharp bark. Its head jerked up, the trail was just caught. Charles noticed the immediate reaction and immediately understood. Her spirit had come across something. Having confirmed that the prey was already in hand, Silva turned to his companions. After hearing confirmation from both Charles and Kaguya, he gave the decisive order, chase their target. At night, in front of a pair of wooden buildings, a small group stands in the shadows preparing for the next step. The group is ready. Fenner Wolf leads at the front, Ru follows behind, then Charles, Kaguya, and Silva all keep a sharp eye on the target under the starry sky. Heya breaks the silence and asks Silva what the plan is and whether they all need to get inside. Then she turns to the wolf. Ru, little one, are you coming down from there? The beast responds with a joyful bark. Yet Charles's voice cuts through the silence with anxiety. He asks if the two of them will have enough strength. Silva brushes off the idea of full infiltration and bluntly states that only he and Charlie will go inside. The order is for Kaguya to wait outside. She meets him with a sharp look and challenges his decision. Silva reminds her, despite all her troubles, last time he still let their target slip away. With a confident smile, he acknowledges her correctness. I know, he says, explaining, that is why he wants her to stay outside. He explains even more clearly without unnecessary words. Her strength is somewhat exaggerated, and in close combat she is not the best. For infiltration, he says, Ruru and Charles are needed, and inside there must be someone to hold the guard outside. His words soften her face, a blush spreads across her cheeks. She quietly replies that he knows her well. Suddenly a wave overwhelms her. She freezes in the air behind his back, spreading her arms in a dramatic pose. She loudly declares how very happy she is and already wonders if this feeling is love, then quickly cuts herself off. Of course not. Sylva's freezes in place, stunned, while Charles and Ruru just look on indifferently. In an elevated position, she formally takes on the role. She announces that she will follow his orders to respond to his love. Inside the building, he speaks the final step of the plan. With a confident expression, he convinces his companions he will not miss any threat. Then he turns to Charles. He wants Ruru to take the lead, and the wolf spirit greets this proposal fiercely and joyfully. The wolf's liveliness brings a smile to her. She thinks about how reliable Ruru is. But the spirit sharply growls in response, ready to act. Attention is now fully focused on Charles. He orders her to stay behind for her own safety. She casts a glance at him, and a faint blush appears on her cheeks. With a set of formations, they enter the dark, hollow interior space of the structure. Sword in hand, Sylva steals the expression from his face and gestures for them to move forward. They cautiously advance down the wooden corridor, Ruru in front. Breathing greedily and sniffing, they search for any sign of danger. The uneasy silence is broken by a sudden dull thud. Charles stumbles and falls, unexpectedly frightening Sylva. She sharply looks back in surprise. She quickly apologizes, blushing, and clutches the front of her coat with her hands. She says she was just a little scared. Her words make Sylva's heart pound. He even blushes, and in his thoughts it becomes clear. Her being nervous is completely understandable. After all, she is still just a student at Heroes Academy. Charles's fear was a pretense while she clutched the fabric of her coat. In her mind, she replayed Sylva, her favorite heroine, and wondered if she by chance was not dreaming. Silence tears the quiet moment. Sylva's vigilance jerks forward as soon as he asks Rira what happened. The spirit wolf freezes in place, growling and barking madly into the darkness ahead. He peers into the darkness, trying to understand if the threat is already here. Separating himself between his comrade and the possible danger, he orders Charlie to retreat. She obeys without hesitation while Ruru closely watches the closed doors ahead. A cloaked figure emerges from the shadows. Stepping forward, its face hidden by a deep hood. She rushed through the space with a stifled scream, and Sylva's eyes flashed with recognition. He is sure this figure and path are familiar to him. The attacker grabs his arm, then swiftly slips past him and lands heavily on 4 boards. He instantly turns around and launches into a new attack. The strange, almost clumsy attack hits Sylva as if something is off about it. There is a feeling, but he cannot decide. Is it not his own imagination? The cloaked killer abruptly straightens forward, his sharp claws reaching for Sylvan the floor. Without missing a beat, the young guard pulls himself together and decides to unleash his Elincia sword style to end the fight here and now. He strikes and rushes into battle, swinging the blade in a powerful upward arc. He shouts the name of the technique at the top of his lungs, upper slash, and as soon as the blade hits the killer, fragments scatter everywhere. The force of the blow knocks the killer to the ground, a heavy, dull rumble. Sylva breathes heavily, stands rooted to the spot, and stares, unable to believe what happened so suddenly. After the defeat, the figure remains motionless, and involuntarily the thought stirs. Could his opponent really have been so weak? His thoughts were interrupted by Charles Orlin, who appeared in the neighboring doorway with Finner, cautiously asking if Sylva managed to put down that killer. Approaching closer, Sylva looked away and blushed slightly from the praise but waved it off. No, there is nothing like that anymore. While he speaks, his attention is caught by a quiet rustling. Charles notices that he is distracted and asks if he hears something. He confirms, yes. They agree to find the source of the sound. At that moment, Charles notices something in the dark corridor ahead. Ah, he's there, she exclaims and shows the way to Sylva and Fenrir. She leads them to a stack of large boxes, from which rustling and creaking come. Carefully peeking from behind the edge of the boxes, they simultaneously freeze with wide eyes as soon as they see what is in front of them, while Charles begins to speak and cannot believe his own eyes. Behind the crates, a shocking discovery unfolds. A group of women, bound, gagged, pressed against each other in despair. They quietly moan, twitch, struggling against their own shackles. Sylva and Charles freeze, struck by what they see. He thinks aloud who it could be, mixture of shock and anxiety frozen on his face. Suddenly, through the tension, a bright voice breaks through. The elite Captain Knight Elda steps forward with a radiant smile and loudly greets Sylva, acknowledging the completed work. He suddenly turns around, surprised to see his commander, and immediately gets hit on the head. Elda exclaims with admiring surprise that he not only defeated the monster, but also freed the prisoners. Irritated Kaguya interrupts from the side and reminds the captain that she was there too. With a contemptuous click of her tongue, Elda turns to Kaguya and gives a brief, dry acknowledgement. She too did quite well. Kaguya nods and says a simple thank you, but irritation is still visible in her gaze. Then the captain announces his plan, to report to the seniors that Kaguya, Charles, and Gateguard Silva have safely resolved the vampire incident. With a tense smile, Silva quickly asks her to wait a moment. He leans closer and quietly, pleadingly asks not to mention that he was the one who defeated the vampire. He explains that he wants to avoid any unnecessary attention. Elda looks at him, embarrassed by such a request. Her confusion fades away, replaced by a sly smile. She asks what harm can be expected if his exploits become known, and adds that it will only give her another reason to invite him to the order. Nearby, some guy watches the conversation completely baffled. Silver reads the panic alarm and starts wildly waving his arms. He reminds her that she promised to stop asking him to join the order and shouts a refusal. Elda pretends as if she hears nothing and taps her chin as if trying to remember that promise. When Silva insists she did everything as agreed, Elda clears her throat loudly, abruptly takes over the conversation, and declares she will ensure each of them receives rewards worthy of their hard work before leaving. He stands still, completely stunned just when he thought he had finally escaped the endless persistence of Elda, who was pulling him into the Order of Knights. But she cornered him again. The captain, however, pays no attention to his despair. With a cheerful smile, she extends the heavy sack and announces it as a reward for killing the vampire and rescuing the captives. Charles only watches somewhat stunned by the whole spectacle. Taking the bag, he immediately thinks about the victims. He asks how the women they saved are feeling. Elda reassures him everyone is safe. She explains that it seems they were held captive for a short time and no one suffered serious injuries, so they regained consciousness very quickly. And she adds her own grim version: the vampire probably kept them as a food reserve. Her words hardly ease his thoughts. A tense expression flashes across his face as he runs through the details. There is something wrong with this event. He silently contemplates the vampire's actions. Keeping prisoners as simple emergency food is too primitive. He doubts that a creature with such intelligence would act so crudely, so he decides to gather more information and concludes. The church will have the most extensive knowledge about this. While Silva drowns in her own guesses, Kaguya notices that the knight captain has also drifted away somewhere. Waving her hand in front of Elda's face, she asks what happened, trying to pull the confused and blushing captain out of his delirium. By the gates, Silva looks distracted. He stammers and insists that nothing happened. The captain of the elite knights, Elda, brushes him off and says he can leave now. Silva quickly thanks him for the hard work. He says goodbye and walks away with a heavy, thoughtful expression on his face, tightly clutching the bag, while Elda heads in the opposite direction. His worried look does not go unnoticed. Kaguya suddenly appears nearby, leans closer, and with an all-knowing smile asks if something is bothering him. He shudders and admits she has already figured him out. Kaguya responds without hesitation that it should be so, of course, since he is her husband. They ask what exactly is on his mind. He says he is haunted by a persistent suspicion and his attempt to understand what is really happening is still ongoing. She is touched by his concentration and snorting with laughter, she says, when he goes deep into thought, his face looks good just like a detective's. Embarrassed, he asks her to stop teasing him. Agya announces, since their case is technically already solved, she will head back to replenish her mana. She gives a final playful encouragement, praying that her dear detective finally reaches the answer. They part ways. He feels the need to apologize, saying he dragged her around all sorts of places for days. She waved it off. It was she who asked to be taken with him in the first place. Then he remembers the reward and says that he still needs to give her a third of her share. Kaguya brushes off that huge sum as if it were nothing. She moves closer and assures him that the reward of spending time with him is enough for her. She jumps over the wall, waves him a playful goodbye, and calls her dear husband. Then she asks if he is not blushing. He is burning with shame and says he wishes she wouldn't say such things so directly to his face. I watched as Kaguya walked away. Her last words were a playful warning, no cheating, followed by a clear request: next time enter through the proper entrance. Her phrases echoed in his head for a long time as he stood alone, staring into the sky where she disappeared. Betrayal, he whispered, and a hint of confusion trembled on his face. Rejecting that thought, he descends the stone stairs, and without stopping, shouts an apology to the one waiting for him below. At the foot of the stairs, Charles Orland met him with a warm smile and assured him it was no trouble at all. He inquired about Kaguya, and Charles explained. She had already gone home, she had some matters to attend to. After that, Kaguya thanked Charlie and said his help was decisive in solving the case. She modestly brushed off the praise and assured she just supported for her own reasons. But Charles stubbornly held to his opinion. He was grateful and confident their contribution would definitely be recognized in the evaluations at Heroes Academy. When he handed her the reward money, a thought flashed through his mind. Her happy face was a far better reward than any gold. His surprise did not confuse her. Kaguya firmly refused to share the money and raised her hand to stop him. When Charles asked why, she quietly and firmly explained her reasoning. She had only found the demon, not defeated it. And she swore to herself until she became an official heroine capable of defeating demons on her own, she would accept no reward. Her determination threw him off balance for a moment, froze. He was genuinely moved by her noble goal, and involuntarily it flashed through his mind. This was his favorite trait in her. Inspired by her devotion, he put forward a new proposal. He would gladly buy her everything she desired, but he had one condition. In return, he wanted to receive something of his own. At his words, Charles closes her eyes and a deep blush floods her cheeks. Quietly apologizing, she explains, what she desires is not something that can be obtained with money. She continues quietly breaking into a simple "you can." This confuses Silva even more. He scratches the back of his head, his own face burning with shame as he tries to understand what she meant. Looking at him softly but persistently from top to bottom, she finally brings her true desire to the surface. What does she want? She simply says, to be with him. Silva fidgets in place, clenches his nervous hand, a drop of sweat appears on his forehead because he stubbornly cannot decide on his clothes. The thought of a date with Charlie, his favorite person, seems almost unbelievable to him. The only thing he truly wants is to spend time with her. Finally, he stops at a simple shirt. But his preparations are interrupted by a knock on the door. Maud stands on the threshold and calls him outside to meet. He glances at the clock and panics, quickly apologizing to Maud as he rushes off, waving his hand and explaining that he has a date and must decline the offer. The old guard remains standing alone. The word date beats in his head like a dull echo, while he looks after the young man leaving with a stunned expression. Meanwhile, Silver reaches the lively fountain square. His nerves are already on edge. He recalls, he has no experience with dates, not even in his past life when he was a corporate drone, so now he anxiously racks his brain about how to even start a conversation. He desperately tries to pull himself together, internally repeating that this is not some official meeting by arrangement. The spiral of thoughts is interrupted by a familiar voice. His name sounds in a call, followed by an apology. He is late. His eyes widen in surprise. Before him stands Charles Orland, not in his usual attire, but in a luxurious light dress with delicate details, and on his feet elegant sandals. She greets him with a simple morning hello, but her smile fades as soon as she notices his reaction, and she asks tenderly if he is crying. Wiping a tear from his eye, he admits, he was simply overwhelmed with happiness. He never thought he would see her in everyday clothes. She responds with a gentle, reassuring gesture. He clenches his fist, stunned by his own state, and thinks that there are no reproaches in his life. Above, Charles Orland looks down with a worried face and notices that he is behaving strangely. She is shocked by such behavior, and she exclaims that it seems as if his own soul is about to leave his body, but moment by moment she returns to reality. He understands. It was a dangerous glitch. The shock almost tore his life apart. Straightening his breath, he scratched the back of his head, apologized for scaring her, and wished her a good morning. Charles smiled warmly and responded to the greeting. When the awkward moment passed, he asked what she wanted to do today. Charles suggested going shopping together and recalled that a new cafe had recently opened. She added that she would gladly go wherever he wanted. After clarifying the plans, they both walked through the city streets, sticking to the corridor of its bustling main thoroughfare. Their shopping trip begins in earnest. Charles happily wanders between clothing departments, and Silva supports her with a gesture and encouraging thumbs up. Then the day drags on, and Silva literally sinks in the embrace of numerous shopping bags, while Charles happily finds a reason to make yet another purchase. She stands triumphantly with outstretched arms, showing off the loot, and Charles presses the newly acquired item to his chest, beaming with happiness. After a successful shopping spree, they finally reach a new cafe. A charming sign hangs just above the entrance. Inside, Silva holds a cup of coffee in his hand and looks attentively and intently at the interlocutor. He addresses her Charlie and directly asks why she, among all people, invited him on a date. He waited for her answer, and she began to explain, leaning forward a little. She wanted to talk to him alone. Some time had passed since they last had such an opportunity, and something had long been pressing in her mind. He encouraged her to continue asking what exactly was troubling her. She explained, all the problems started because of their party leader, Alan, during the process of creating the party and studying at Heroes Academy. Her face twisted with discomfort. She admitted, Alan flirts every day with the girls in their company and it truly destabilizes her. The information hit Silva right in the chest. He replayed it in his head, trying to understand whether Alan was really driving her to such a state and whether he was actually dating those other women. Charles confirmed what Silva silently asked. Alan had also made advances toward her, and that was already a serious problem. A sharp, stunning realization overwhelmed him. He linked Alan's behavior to a specific, difficult scenario from what he once knew, the harem route of this world. He remembered it was an incredibly hard path to go through. He recalled the strict rules of the route. One must evenly reveal affection to all heroines while simultaneously clearing all their confession events. If you date only one, somewhere in the middle, failure immediately occurs and everyone abandons you. According to her words, he already knew, Alan and Charlie had significant negative affection points left. Returning to the present, Charles continued her story. She explained, she trusts Alan as a comrade, but the very thought that he flirts with other girls along with the idea that he has a mistress makes her feel nauseous. She continued and admitted that Alan often invited her on dates. She refused each time, but he remained persistent. Silva listened and quietly said that it sounded like a very difficult situation. When Charles began to add something else, she blushed and covered her mouth. Meanwhile, Silva felt a sharp pang of guilt. He hid his face and silently apologized to her for having taken the same path so many times before his rebirth. She suddenly fell silent. Such sudden silence ignites his curiosity and he could no longer wait calmly. He longed to know what she was going to say next. But she brushed it off as if it were nothing, so he was left with a question. He silently watches as Charles carefully takes a sip from her cup, while she keeps her eyes closed, thinking aloud. A girl's heart is a capricious, tangled thing, and honestly admits that she has secrets she cannot even tell him. Her words hit so hard that Hestanetti's thrown back. He falls out of the chair. He raises his eyes to the ceiling and his head spins with a thought that cannot be true. The rumble makes Charles look back. She leans over him with a worried face and asks what happened. He lifts his gaze from the Flority to answer, but a new voice cuts through the air. The voice belongs to Alan. He appears confidently as if emerging from a dark mist. Beside him are two young women, Margaret Nara's and Rena Kesh's, both named as candidates for heroines. Just imagine to meet you here, he exclaims. His sudden appearance completely confuses Charles. He asks what he and his companions are doing here. Rena, one of the girls, cheerfully and carefree declares, the three of them are on a date. Then she leans closer to Charles and with a bright smile hints, you recently invited her to go with you too. Watching the conversation from the spot, Silva slowly takes a sip from the cup and quietly concludes, these are probably the two girls Alan is currently courting. Suddenly, memories from his past life flood back. Rena and Margaret are considered easy heroines who can be conquered. In the game's plot, they not only fall in love with Alan but actively support his creation of a harem and help him lure other women. He organizes the social dynamics in the academy and understands how difficult it is to change party members. For Charles, this will be an impossibly awkward environment, will be forced to constantly stay close to the leader's other romantic interests. Alan's gaze slides past Charles and stops on the stranger sitting at her table. In his eyes, there is already a question, who is this? Charles, with a tired face, introduces the man next to him as Silva, an ordinary gatekeeper, and then, barely raising his tone, adds that they are also on a date. Alan freezes in shock and immediately feels a powerful surge of mana, as if it spilled out directly from the gatekeeper, and he shivers. What could this mean? This confusion ignites indignation. He rushes to Charles and demands an explanation why she refused his proposal only to then go on a date with someone so inconspicuous. Charles sharply cuts in. He says that he is behaving rudely towards Silva. She decides to leave, urging Silva to move somewhere else. A shadow falls over Alan's face as he watches, while he silently begs Charles not to follow the gatekeeper. He processes what he has seen and is overwhelmed by a gloomy realization. Charles meets with this man, and his thoughts immediately fold into a darker conclusion. He claims that the gatekeeper must be a demon. Both Silva and Charles react with shock. He presses the accusation and pins Silva to the latest rumors about a demon kidnapper of women. He says simply, Silva is guilty, she planned to deceive Charles and kidnap her. His companions instantly pick up this version. Rena exclaims that it all makes sense. There are no other reasons why Charles would refuse Owen's proposal. Margaret agrees, the demon probably brainwashed her. She sharply cries out in despair, denying it. No one brainwashed her. Exhausted, she begs them to understand why they stubbornly do not see what she really feels. Her pain makes Silva watch her sorrowfully, and he quietly calls her name. He interprets her pleas as yet another confirmation of a powerful mind control spell. Pointing a finger, he roars at Silva, calling him a pathetic little demon and swearing he will not allow the toy to be near someone so dear to him. Silva just grits his teeth in powerless anger. The heroines rush to intervene. Alan and Margaret grab Charles by the hands to pull her away. They insist that she cannot stay there, but she breaks free, fights, moans, and screams in protest. Alan, broken by the sight, mutters aloud that the brainwashing is too cruel, and in doing so completely misunderstands what is happening. The accusations echoed in Silva's head. The image of the hero he once respected turned into a pathetic truth. When this disappointment overwhelmed him, he clenched the cup in his hand so tightly that it slipped and shattered, shards scattering across the table. The sharp crack of porcelain made Alan and his companions look that way. Margaret looked away in surprise and aloud asked Silva's name again. Alan turned and at that moment saw Silva rising to his feet, releasing a threatening aura. Alan, in response, he snatched his weapon and demanded that Alan explain what Silva was trying to pull off. But Silva calmly raised her hand and stopped Charles before he could intervene. She looked directly at Alan and the icy expression on her face cut off. He didn't even guess what a truly thick-headed fool he was. Charles looked at him anxiously while Alan explained that he was going to stay silent, but Alan's own words touched him. Suddenly changing tone, Silva turned to Charles with a gentle smile. She touched his hair and apologized for letting Alan get under her skin. Then Silva looked again at Alan and his friends, and her face remained unshaken. She stated that she could not convey to Charles their current behavior. Alan's face twisted with rage. He tore at the refusal furiously, shouting that he did not need Silva's permission. Nearby, Rena Killy watched how exactly Alan was dispersing the chatter. A biting remark pushed Alan to action. He declared that he would simply take her back by force. He rushed forward. Silva's gaze narrowed. She accepted the challenge. Fine, so be it, he thought. When the opponent rushed to attack, a memory of a happier time between Charles and Alan surfaced in his mind. He realized, Alan, as she once knew her, would definitely understand her feelings. He had no intention of denying the reality of the aggressive figure standing before him. But in this Alan, who was now, there was one thing he could not forgive. Her own result hardened. She would be cursed if she allowed such a scenario to unfold. Alan's eyes burned with fierce, unwavering focus. He declared, a reality where Charlie cannot smile is unacceptable. His outburst made Charles look with anxiety and mutter the name Sylvia. Sylvia stepped forward in simple, everyday clothes and calmly announced that he would personally deal with Alan and put him in his place. But this proposal made Alan even angrier. He barked, called Sylvia an arrogant demon, and swore to tear him apart with his saber. As if the threat did not affect him at all, Sylvia's face became harder. A sinister smile barely clung to his lips. He clenched his fist. Dark energy swirled around him, and Sylvia warned Alan not to underestimate the man who remained a stubborn, troublesome nerd from a past life. Now they stood face to face, the air thickened with unspoken aggression. On the territory of the heroic academy, on the spacious training fields, several figures gathered. Alan faces Silva and says he can't believe it. Did he really choose this very place for their clash? He swings the sword forward and declares that here he can unleash all his power regardless of any surroundings. Alan just smirks boldly, yet still warns Silva, he will regret this. To prepare for the clash, Charles Orland returns to Silva and guilt freezes on her face. She apologizes, saying it is because of her that he was dragged into this mess. He replies that she has nothing to apologize for. He looks away once more, then grows firm as he says, the one who really needs to apologize is Alan. While Alan was kicking off, Margaret and Eris shouted weakly but boastfully, saying that with his skill and strength he could in a moment sweep away a worthless demon like Silva. Renat twitched impatiently. Alan, strike quickly, otherwise they won't have time to continue their day. The companion's body flares with a mighty aura. Alan proclaims, the fight is obviously over, and as soon as he wins, Charles will fall in love with his power again. Charles looks away, clearly uneasy. Silva's expression hardens. She bursts with cold fury. She swears to defeat this man and make him apologize to Charlie. She looks at him and admits, Alan is truly strong, but she tells Silva that she wants him to win and will sincerely root for him. He smiles, accepts the support, and replies, just leave it to me. Encouraged by him, strengthened by his faith, Silva steps against the opponent. Alan mocks, asks if he is ready and if he really intends to fight in such shabby armor. Without hesitation, Silva raises the sword and declares, come on, let's go. He held his simple sword forward, his gaze steady and unbreakable. This weapon, he declared, is quite enough to face Alan. His opponent could only sneer contemptuously in response to these words. At Alan's response, he was jealous that he wouldn't extinguish dreams and rushed forward. His blade exploded with a bright charge slash. But the guardian goalkeeper was faster, easily dodged aside and blocked the strike. Alan's eyes widened in disbelief. He dodged. The opponent's shock gave him a window. While Alan was still recovering, Silva was already breaking inside, his defense fist pulled back and ready to strike. A blow with a heavy, muffled thud hit Alan's forearm. Although he blocked the attack, the force still stunned him. Alan gritted his teeth, acknowledging how brutally that punch landed. The recoil from his own strike pushed him backward. He slid through the mud. Alan froze, looking confused, with no idea whether this incredible strength was the result of magical enhancement. Squinting, he felt a new understanding arise in his eyes. Pointing with his index finger, Alan declared that Silva was not an ordinary guard. Silva exhaled disdainfully and threw his sword to the ground. The metal clanged. He reminded Alan that he had already said he was nothing special, just a brewmaster. This gesture left Alan completely stunned. He did not understand what Silva was hinting at. Then he snapped his fingers and a confident smile spread across his face. Against an opponent like Alan, he claimed, his bare hands were more than enough. And when Alan took offense, he even growled to make sure Alan did not underestimate him. Fueled by rage, he lunged forward again. With a wide swing, he traced an arc with his blade, deflecting the strike along the channel's curve with a silver splash, and a moment later, he was right up close. He ordered Alan to grit his teeth, but at the same time his fist struck directly into the jaw, and the blow sounded heavy and mature. A shove sent Alan flying. His body jerked wildly and was thrown backward through the air. His lips burst out a scream of shock and pain because that blow completely stunned him. The onlookers were nearly torn apart by what they saw. Charles Orland and Renat Keshes froze, their eyes wide with shock, and Renat was about to scream from disbelief. Their shock was justified. Alan flew from a single move. With a crash, he slammed into a distant wall. Renat voiced their shared surprise, noting one move was enough for Alan and he was incapacitated. Nearby, a dark-haired man in a cloak knelt, gripping his sword and cursing how things had turned out. Lying in the crater, Margaret Naras rushed to him, urged him to pull himself together, and began casting a healing spell, calling on the power of solace to mend the wounds. The one who dealt the blow, Silva, wandered around with a satisfied smile. The fight seemed to have done him good. He felt lighter, but for a moment a thought flashed through his mind. Maybe he hit too hard. His opponent was preoccupied with other matters. The accomplices were somewhere out of sight. The dark-haired man clenched his teeth in pain and rage, while Renat and Charles tried to support him, their faces trembling with anxiety as well. He shook off this support from himself. His gaze fixed on Charles. When Charles asked if he had come for Alan, he grimly and decisively named the true purpose: to take Charles back. From somewhere behind the yard, Silva began to respond and talk about the level of abilities. Well, Charlie is not yours. His words were drowned out by a furious roar. Shut up, growled the dark-haired man, his face twisted with rage. We are bound by strong love. His wild declaration echoed, and behind him in the darkness, a mocking demonic visage sneered. Pointing his sword forward, he solemnly swore, Demon Lord, I swear to my comrade I will defeat you. Then he lowered his voice, narrowed his eyes, and fixed his gaze directly on Silva. After that, he quietly, with a cold threat, said, I wonder what is behind this. He speaks confidently, feeling the heartbeat of his comrades. He declares, they are connected by strong love, a bond that will never be broken. Elsewhere, Silva watches how these events unfold. He says the story is a bit cliché, but still admits he loves these classic tales. He likes the passion in the dialogues, admires how cool Alan is, and urges him forward. Suddenly, Silva's voice cuts through the scene. He raises his hand and points an accusing finger at the dark-haired man, shouting, Woman beater, stop spouting such damn lines. Both the man and Charles flinch at that outburst. The dark-haired man glances at him with hatred, furious to madness. He shouts back that Silva is just spouting complete nonsense and declares that he will become a hero. His passionate statement does not subside. He stands firm and insists that Charles be nearby. Seeing this, Silva presses his face with his hands. A thought flashes in his mind, this guy still hasn't understood anything. The dark-haired man ignores the interruption and immediately shifts all attention to Charles. She begs her to wait, promising to return right now. Charles is silent, lowering his head. She finally lifts her gaze, but not at him. Her eyes are distant as she calls Alan and asks, Listen. Her voice cuts sharply into Alan's ear. He flinches, turns abruptly. Hope and confusion flash across his face. He hasn't yet grasped that she has already decided everything. Barely managing to continue, another woman steps forward and places her hand on Alan's shoulder. She looks him straight in the eyes and snaps, From today she is leaving his party. Shock distorts Alan's face. Charles and he remain completely stunned, their mouths wide open in disbelief. From his place, he can see Silva watching this bloody commotion, a faint blush barely flickering on her cheeks. The drama continues. Charles shifts his gaze to Silva. She explains that thanks to him, her feelings have finally become clear. Charles is certain, through hard work she can become a hero even if she has to leave her current party. Her phrase is drowned out by the wildly theatrical appearance of a dark-haired man who demands, "Say what you are talking about there." Charles does not blink and orders him to listen. He stares in disbelief, his voice breaking, but he stubbornly insists. They were supposed to share a deep bond. Charles, however, keeps himself composed in an even, impeccably calm tone. He states that no one is manipulating her. He is struck by shock freezes, unable to utter a single word. Then, with a tired face, she asks him to stop it already. Despite her words, he clenches his teeth and boldly declaring, throws out, he will become her lover and the strongest hero. His gaze involuntarily shifts to Silva, a silent accusation that the circumstances have changed. With a roar, he releases a skill, shouting about soul bond to activate it, but when powerful energy flares around, the air trembles. The enchantment ignites and immediately arcs toward Alan and Charles, enveloping them in crackling power. They shudder and let out cries not from awe, but from surprise as the energy cuts and pierces through them. From her perspective, Silver immediately recognizes the nature of the spell. The dark-haired man looks ahead and grits his teeth. He feels his own mana drifting away as it devours the bond he just cast. He perfectly understands the mechanics of the spell. It is a technique that transforms bonds with comrades into a special form of mana. The power depends on two things: how many close allies are nearby and how deep the bond between them is. The more lovers he has, the stronger it becomes. Silver understands all this. The man deliberately sought new companions and only deepened relationships with them to master this very spell. This realization fills Silva with disgust. The man is truly irreparably corrupted. Suspicions are confirmed. The dark-haired man only sneers contemptuously, and it becomes clear that his entire attachment to Charles was just a way to strengthen his own spells. Bang! Suddenly a powerful explosion rings out. The dark-haired man is thrown backward. Silva's place is familiar. It seems to evoke his own past in memory, as if someone once also chose the wrong path. Even despite that man's defeat, Charles looks anxiously and warns Silva, let him be careful, because he admits there is an incredible amount of mana in what is with the ex-girlfriend. Silver notes, unlike in the game, in real life there is no second chance. Despite the stakes, he turns around with a confident smile and declares that he will quickly resolve this situation. His statement enrages the dark-haired man. He shouts about his ambition to become the strongest hero and save everyone. Charles looks on with contempt, questioning the very talk of saving people after such pain and dismissing the claims to heroism. Silva simply accepts what was said as it is. The man directs his rage at Silva and shouts that he needs the strength of everyone to achieve his goal. Unfazed, Silva raises his sword and the dark-haired opponent is suddenly thrown back with a piercing scream of pain. A burst of energy explodes outward. When he trembles after the blow, a brightness appears in Silva's eyes. He says, as a resident of this world and a fan of Alan, he cannot forgive anyone who would make his favorite sad. Swearing to make this man pay, Silva prepares to unleash the secret sword-style technique Zaylansha. He shouts the name of the strike blue scud. The swordsman rushes forward. The body becomes a continuous blurred motion as he performs the technique, and behind him trails a dazzling trail of shimmering particles. His blade whistles through the air with blinding speed. From the flash after the strike bursts a brilliant wave of energy. Charles is forced to close her eyes. The shockwave hurls Alan and the dark-haired man across the ground. Standing over the fallen opponent, Silva advises him to try to understand the feelings of others. From the ground, the dark-haired man looks up in horror and a sinister realization overwhelms him. His only connection has already changed. He is hit by a fall. Realization crushes him. Nearby lies a broken sword and the man himself sinks to his knees, completely defeated. He remained on the ground for a long time, his gaze distant and unfocused. Somewhere in the background Silva let out a tired sigh. The fight was over. But the defeated man's attention was no longer here. In a weak voice to someone invisible, he said, "You really disappointed me, Hero Alan." A sharp voice cuts through the tension on the training ground. Charles Orland steps forward and demands to know what everyone is doing. She directs the question to Alan, what is all the fuss about on the day off? And Silva, in panic, finds out it's someone named Ms. Reed. Riv throws him into a dead end. Alan desperately tries to recall if a character with that name ever appeared in the game and whether she might be the same minor scrap heroine. But while he is racking his brains, Charles Orland breaks away with a glance and fiercely shoots down at Alan with furious rage. He answers her silent question. Alan Stammer explains as if pointing at Silva with his finger. He says they suspect that man is a demon. Anger recedes, leaving instead a restrained unease. She raises her gloved hand to her chin and quietly mutters accusations to herself. That boy is a demon, you say. Before she can continue to ponder, Silva barks at a voice filled with conviction. He swears he is not a demon. His refusal is interrupted by the appearance of an elite knight captain. She addresses Silva directly and notes that it seems he has gotten involved in a very troublesome story. She then explains, "A surge of incredible mana drew her here, and she was surprised to find him here." Filled with irritation, Silva bluntly replies that she has the same feeling. He asks the commander what she is doing at the academy. She cheerfully explains that she came to the meeting about future combat practical exercises that will take place at the academy. The knightly order will be present, she adds, just in case something unforeseen happens. Silva listens, and an expression of understanding appears on his face. When the group leaves, his thoughts sharply return to the main story of the game. He recalls this very episode. During the hero candidates' practice at the academy, they are attacked by level 3 demons just at the lower ranks. He remembers this is Alan's first real fight. A picture flashes in his mind of Alan and a dark-haired man fighting side by side, but the thought breaks off, leaving the weight of unnamed anxiety. Yet still, the elite knight captain illuminated him with a radiant smile and addressed him by name Silva. She playfully reproached him. Was it really worthy of him to behave like that with a candidate for heroes? Her words were reinforced by her movements. She playfully grabbed Alan and, throwing in that mocking the weak was not his style at all, instantly made the crowd laugh. Silva suddenly stumbled and began tremblingly explaining something in confusion, while the captain seemed to be guessing whether she had missed by accident. His embarrassment quickly turned into rage. Alan lunged and broke free from the bonds, and a look of annoyance gathered on his face as he swore one day he would defeat Silva with his own hands. And in this feeling, Silva recognized and how a mood unsuitable for a protagonist. After that statement, he turned around and took off running. Others called for him to wait, but Alan didn't even look back. He ran until he disappeared into the distance. When Alan vanished from sight, the captain turned to Silva. A knowing look flashed in her eyes. She noticed. Alan seemed to hate him very much, and Silva could only wipe the sweat, acknowledging that a lot had indeed happened between them. Then her gaze stopped on another young woman nearby. She called out and asked if it was Charles by any chance. Charles asked in surprise how the captain even knew her name. The captain explained. She had heard a lot about her from Silva, especially recalling how she helped with the vampire case. Charles confirmed that Silva always comes to her rescue, so the captain inquired, does she also study at Heroes Academy? She continued to praise the gatekeeper, assuring that, as far as she knew, Silva was the strongest soldier she had ever known, and added, just being near him and skills start to grow rapidly. Charles, blushing, quietly agreed yes, she thought the same. From the sincere praise, they both immediately felt awkward. Charles cleared his throat embarrassed, and Silva shyly scratched the back of his head. But the captain, on the contrary, found this exchange pleasant and laughed loudly. Wasting no time, Charles decided to break the moment and stepped forward. She apologized for interrupting their conversation and said it was time to go to a meeting with Miss Alada. After that, she formally addressed the captain by name. The captain of the elite knights, Elda, quickly apologized and disappeared from the conversation, both from Silva and Charles. Silva, scratching the back of his head, also awkwardly apologized for any trouble he might have caused. As soon as she walked away, she suddenly stopped, sharply turned back and showed a wide, mischievous smile. She waved off his apologies and declared there were no problems at all. Her face lit up with joyful accusation, and she poked directly at Silva. She proclaimed that this was trouble, and since he had made a scene, he must participate in combat practice at Heroes Academy. Then, laughing out loud, she added, he has no right to refuse, and Silva remained completely stunned. He froze and found no words, and the order echoed dully in his head. His entire being tightened with confusion. He could not comprehend what he had just been ordered to do. While he tries to understand what is happening, Charles looks at him with reproach and pity. She apologizes for dragging him into so much trouble and admits it was her illegal intrusion that was the primary cause. He immediately calms her down, assuring that there is nothing to apologize for, and explains everything he did was solely his own choice. His face softens every time he looks at her. He says that now, because of this, she can leave the hero's party without any reproach, and that he is truly happy for her. He himself delves into reflections on the situation. Now he is sure Charles has finally stepped down from the position of the heroine of the main story. He thinks that she is unlikely to have a significant role in the main plot further, and wonders whether her dream of becoming a hero will come true. A sudden thought pierces him. If Charles is no longer in the main story, does that mean that even if he dives into it head first, she still won't appear? He cannot imagine a future where she doesn't exist at all. He glanced stealthily at the unsuspecting Charles, and a blush crept across his face. A hope flashed through him. A confused thought slipped through his mind. Maybe his involvement still wouldn't harm her. He walks beside Charles, his thoughts racing wildly. Inside, he scolds himself to be happy because his beloved person is near, but aloud he thanks her, and his superfluid thoughts immediately show on his face, making the tension noticeable. She answers, and a new determination cuts through her voice. She tells him Thanks to him, she has toughened up to become a hero, even if she has to do it alone. Her face softens as she looks at him, a faint blush on her cheeks. She begins to ask what he will do on the day she becomes a full-fledged hero and whether he will. A sharp sound of a child's crying suddenly stops them. They turn and see a small boy sobbing alone. Silvo approaches, asks if he is okay and where his parents are. The boy wipes his eyes and says they are not here. Then Silvo asked where the boy's house was. The child replied, she no longer had a mother or father and his home was the church. The answer threw Silvo off track. Tears well up in his eyes and the boy keeps going anyway. He was at the priest's playing outside with everyone. He finishes the story, explaining that everyone else went their separate ways and he was simply left behind. Silva immediately understands. The boy was only separated from his group. Hearing this, Charles looks at Silva with concern and suggests taking the child to the church. He agrees without hesitation. He kneels down to the boy's level and a warm smile lights up his face. He asks what his name is. Addie answers and Silva immediately offers to carry him home on his back. At this idea, Addie's eyes widen with surprise and joy. Now that Addie is securely settled on his back, Silva walks through the city streets. The boy looks around and catches a wave of unexpected joy, and Charles walks beside them, and she has a warm, happy smile on her lips as she watches the two. Silva carries the little boy on his back while he and Charles walk along the stone path. Addie is perched high and shines with joy. Then Addie points ahead and exclaims that they have reached the church. The side of the building turns a thought in Silva's mind. Maybe here they can gather information about vampires. At the church entrance, the priest suddenly rushes outside. His face is a mixture of panic and relief as he calls Addie's name. He says he is incredibly glad, the boy is safe and asks if two strangers brought him back. Then he kneels down, smiles gently and introduces himself. Dan, the child's guardian. Charles confirms the situation that Addie described and Dan beams, thanking both Mr. Silva and Miss Charles from the bottom of his heart for ensuring his safe return. Standing up again, Dan expresses deep gratitude and admits fearfully that he almost lost his heart when the other children told him Addie was separated from them. The boy indignantly denies and shouts that it was the others who separated from him. Dan gently scolds him, explaining he still made everyone worry so he has to apologize. Addie reluctantly agrees. Watching this conversation, Silva notes, Dan can be called a kind-hearted priest who knows how to properly calm a child. This convinces him that the man might still answer his question. Dan's gaze slides again to the guests and he insists, thanks must be given officially. Silva is already about to refuse but suddenly stops, realizes he has a chance. He tells Dan, actually there is one thing he wants to ask about. Surprised but still agreeing, Dan replies that he will answer if he can. Then Silva turns to Charles and asks if they can be given some time. Seeing their consent, Dan invites them to talk inside the church and leads them there. He sits down at the table, slightly confused by the sudden and surprisingly serious stream of questions. Leaning forward, he asks Silva what exactly he wants to find out. Silva replies that he hoped the priest could teach him everything he knows about vampires. The word hangs in the air and Dan is struck by shock. He just keeps repeating the vampires. Initial surprise of Mavj immediately sinks into focused questioning. He apologizes and asks for clarification. Silva asks if he is interested in vampires from myths or the recent vampire incident. Silva confirms, wants to know about both. Silva explains, he is confident that the vampire problem is already solved, but one detail in this matter still gnaws at his thoughts. The priest looks intently at him for a moment, then asks if he is by any chance a knight. Silva confirms yes, at least as far as one can say. His answer seems to pressure the priest. He looks down, clasps his hands together and quietly mutters that he understands. Silva watches him but his face shows no emotion. After a minute of reflection, Dan looks up and suggests sharing what he has learned about them from legends during his service as a cleric. He asks if Silva objects to hearing the details. Dan begins with ancient knowledge. Vampire, such a nickname, he says, is born by demons from legends, as if they grow from vampire bats. Their power is so immense that tales go further, claiming they leveled entire cities to the ground. He reveals where their terrifying power comes from: human blood. The more blood they drink, the stronger they become. One vampire fed by 10 people, Dan describes, can only be defeated by a few first-class heroes, and even then it is not an easy task. And then he adds the last troubling detail. According to the tales, vampires can also create servants. Silva listens carefully, repeats the word, and asks what exactly it means. Dan does not take his eyes off while the priest squeezes his hands and continues. Minions, he explains, are people who have been given vampire blood. According to legend, it gives them powers similar to those of a real vampire and an instinct to attack other people. Catching this gloom, he thanks Dan for the details. Nearby, Charles Orland notices his depressed expression and calls his name. Worry trembles in his voice. Dan assures they can come back with new questions anytime. Then his gaze stops on his own palm. He says it was recently burned and asks if Silva's hand is also injured. The question hangs in the air. Dan quietly swallows the priest's words as if each one needs to be reconsidered. With a last look full of anxiety, he asks him to take care of himself. Silva confirms he will. As soon as they are outside, he turns to Charles and apologizes for dragging her along for so long. She cuts off the apology with a soft smile and reminds him that she was the one who invited him to go out. Then Charles asks if their conversation was about a vampire case. Dan confirms and admits, since he subdued one particular demon, something has been bothering him all the time. For a moment, his consciousness snatches from memory the hooded one he fought. He voices a new theory. The monster he defeated might not have been a demon but a person turned into a minion. If this is true, then the master vampire is still lurking somewhere in the city. Lost in this grim realization, he is pulled back to reality when Charles calls his name. He apologizes for being distracted and, noticing how late it is, offers to escort her home. When she asks if he is sure, he puffs out his chest and confidently states that escorting is also part of a soldier's job. Her face softens from his sincerity, and a faint blush flickers on her cheeks. While she gazes at him, a thought passes through her mind. Today she never got to tell him what she wanted, but now it seems it is enough just to let these moments pass. She stands before a large, majestic building, her face gentle and thoughtful. As she looks into the distance, a secret thought flashes through her mind. Will she ever find the right moment to tell him everything she has on her heart? Somewhere else, Dan the priest lifts a piece of torn dark fabric. Through it stretches one round, holy spot. His face is stern. A drop of sweat rolls down his temple as he studies the clue, his brow tense, converging into a focused shadow. At his post before the massive fortified gates, the guard with a silver bell calls the next in line. Holding a pen and notebook, he glances back there, at the seemingly endless queue of people waiting to enter and estimates how much longer it will last. He is running the situation over in his head. It is his first day at the South Gates, and he did not expect it to be so crowded here. Now he understands. Due to the shortage of people everywhere due to frequent incidents with demons, he must perform the duties of the gatekeeper as best as possible. Restlessness settles on him. The exponential increase in demon cases and the recent incident with the vampire feels all too familiar. Everything unfolds as in the main story of the game he knows, but he cannot shake the feeling that there has been a shift in their plans. Eyes widen from a terrifying thought. He wonders if it is his involvement that is the cause, or if he somehow got entangled in the main plotline. His inner thoughts are suddenly cut off by a sharp voice. "Hey, stop!" He flinches and raises his eyes from his work. The voice belonged to another guard with prickly, light hair. He tugged at him for his slackness and ordered him to get back to work. Embarrassed, Silva instantly agreed and politely addressed him, "Mr. Crow." He recognizes Crow, the senior soldier in charge of guarding the southern gates. Inside, Silva notes, the appearance of his superior is truly attractive, but character seems to leave much to be desired. While Silva is sorting out the traveler's documents, he sees Crow leaning towards a young woman, praising her and asking her name. She blushes and introduces herself, Yulia. Crow takes her by the hand, confesses admiration for her name, and asks what brought Yulia to the royal capital. Yulia replies, she is looking for a job as a maid in a flower shop in the market district. Touch her hand or let him turn around and throw her a seductive phrase at the end, call her as beautiful as a flower. Silva watches from the side, grimacing. He is annoyed that his colleague flirts with girls while they are on duty. In an uneven tone, he orders his colleague to work faster, but Crow, unlike him, sends the rookie away. "Get lost and don't bother me," and even adds that he doesn't listen to his orders, while the merchant between them simply asks for permission. Inside him, everything boils on the nerves. Crow piles up trash and himself the same character in the background. When he moans about how much he misses working with Mod Dai, a clear voice breaks out from the crowd looking for the goalkeeper. The voice immediately becomes recognizable, and the anxiety inside him grows like a wave. Commander Elda approaches the gate and announces that she is looking for someone. Immediately comes forward, fawns over the commander's appearance and greedily offers his help. Unmoved by enthusiasm, she clarifies, she is looking for a gatekeeper named Silva. Realizing it is him, Silva tries to slip away unnoticed. The escape is instantaneous. Commander Aleda notices it immediately and grabs the fugitive by the uniform. She states that she needs a favor, so she will borrow him, ordering him to accompany her to the Knight's headquarters right now. Abby Wilder Crow remains by the gates. In a moment in the commander's office at the Knight headquarters, Elda immediately gets to the point. The recent incident with vampires is already resolved. but a new case has appeared, a kidnapping. All the victims she names are women, and the only clue is a report of a suspicious person in a black cloak. Just the mention of the black cloak and the dark memory switches on. For Sela, a brief vision of a threatening figure in a cloak flashes. He voices his suspicions to the commander and says he believes the kidnapping is connected to the vampire case. When she doubts, reminding him that he already defeated Vampire, Silver explains. The creature he fought turned out to be strangely weak. Then he unfolds the theory, recalling that vampires are known to be able to create thralls, and concludes, there is a high chance that the creature he killed was not a master vampire, but one of his subordinate minions. The commander grimly accepts the hint. The real vampire is still at large. Silva's face hardens with sorrow as he clenches his fist, is tormented by the thought that if he had uncovered the truth earlier, he might have prevented this new incident. He sharply agrees to help at the request of Commander Elda, decision that confuses her. She notices that the situation has worsened with the vampires, and it is strange for her to see his sudden agreement, as he would usually be much more categorical against it. With a confident smile, he explains, nothing strange, he simply cannot allow anyone else to clean up the mess for which he feels responsible. He has to be irritatedly happy, he is literally burning with motivation. Elda stands up and hands him a scroll. Take it. It might be a clue for your search, she says. He freezes and carefully examines the offered item. He unrolls the scroll and before them stretches a long list. Elda explains, it contains the victims of the vampire case. Besides the girls he saved, there were other captives. No, they are in the hospital. Elda advises him to visit the clinic, maybe they can provide some information there. Silva immediately asks where the clinic is located. Elda tells him that this is Rachel Clinic, on the outskirts of the city. From the very name, Silva subtly shudders as if he was struck by an electric shock from surprise. She continues, the clinic's doctor, Rachel Forsard, is one of Breaz's subordinate characters and also has a somewhat problematic personality. Elda adds, deepening the connection with her is beneficial, you can buy healing items cheaply. Silva, with a determined expression, confirms that he understands everything and says he will go there immediately. Elda smiles in response. She is counting on him. Silva enters the clinic and the memory of his last visit here breaks off, flashing in his mind. It was then that he saved the captured girls. As soon as he crosses the threshold, a foul stench bites into his nose and mouth. He instinctively holds his breath, covering his nose and mouth. He calls Ms. Rachel, asking if she is here. His eyes scan the room and he immediately notices shelves filled with treatment supplies and medicines. A woman with reddish-brown hair and glasses steps forward, adjusting her frame. She asks what he needs, clarifying, maybe someone is injured or sick, but she immediately glances, no, that's not the case. Silva raises his eyes to her and recognition flashes in his gaze as he puzzles over where he knows her from. He does not hide his surprise. How can she remember him if they met only once? Rachel Forsard confirms who he is and immediately recalls the gatekeeper who let those girls, attacked by demons, slip away. A sly smile appears on her face, slow but confident. She says that of course she will remember him. He was alongside a top hero, or as she calls it, a monster. He objects that Kaguya should not be called a monster, but Rachel simply ignores his remark. She leans closer, exhales a puff of smoke and asks his name. He introduces himself, Silva. Rachel Forsard's gaze runs over him and she notes that he has a funny body, then she sharply commands, undress. At that moment he freezes completely. Confused by the demand, he asks what the reason is. Rachel says directly, if he wants her to listen to him, he must undress first. As he reluctantly takes off his shirt, a small creature like a fairy quietly whispers beside Rachel and explains, this is one of the doctor's bad habits. It turns out she can determine what kind of character you have just by looking at your body. Rachel leans closer, examines his build and notices. He is one of those who looks slender in clothes. After a minute of silence, she says he can put his clothes back on now she has a good idea of who he is. While he pulls the shirt over his head, he cannot understand how such a brief check can tell her anything about him. She ignores his skepticism and states her conclusion. He is not a knight, he is a soldier. When he confirms this is correct, she simply sums up, his body is very funny. Her laughter spreads a dark shadow as she aloud considers that she might return to this later and investigate more thoroughly, dissecting. The suggestion horrifies Silva, but the little creature instantly reassures. The doctor is just joking. He awkwardly stands before Rachel Forsard, now fully dressed. She immediately gets to the point and asks what she should do. He says he wants to investigate those who survived the vampire case. She looks skeptical and reminds him. The case was already settled, and she handed all information to the knights. Unfazed, he explains his logic. It is quite likely that vampires are still alive somewhere, so he needs to interrogate the survivors directly. Her behavior changes instantly. She stands up and tells him to wait a moment. Understanding passes over her face as she agrees to his request. She leads him to a room with paneled doors where a young girl recoils in fear as soon as she sees him. He immediately understands her fright, decides the child has experienced something terrible. Rachel steps forward to calm the little one and says, this is the one he needs to talk to. Then she explains to the girl, there is no need to be afraid because Silva is not evil but a soldier of justice who protects people. He kneels down, catches her gaze, and solemnly vows to protect her and everyone else. He promises to catch the villains who caused her such a trial. His sincerity reaches her, and with new determination she agrees to cooperate. She clenches her fists resolutely, without hesitation, and he does not look away from one of her hands. He points and asks what happened. His gaze catches on a strange cobweb-like bluishness spreading over the back of her palm. He notices the unusual shape and involuntarily asks himself, maybe it is just a bruise. She gently asks if she remembers when it happened. The girl looks away worried, unable to recall the moment. She only says, the mark was already there when you attacked her founder. Those words make him freeze. He silently runs through the consequences in his head. The mark has already been made. Pausing for a moment, he shows the girl an encouraging thumbs up, thanking her for the useful information. The three continue the conversation, and the tension finally dissipates. He lays out his theory to Rachel Forsard. She listens from the adjacent room. He is sure. The strange symbol on the survivor's hand is a mark engraved by the vampire. She steps over the threshold and admits, his reasoning is logical, but it is only a hypothesis, no conclusive evidence. A pause, thoughts swirl. If he is right, this sign could become a clue for those not yet attacked. He straightens his shoulders and confidently feels he finally has a solid gain that will help him solve the case. He sincerely thanks Mrs. Rachel for her attentive cooperation. She barely smiles, holding her gaze half closed, and replies that she is glad she is fine. Her manner sharply changes, a greedy gleam flashes in her eyes. She states that for her help she wants 60,000 gold. When Silva recoils in shock, she waves it off, saying she is joking, but immediately makes a strange counteroffer. For her service, she needs permission to dissect his body when he dies, since she cannot lose such a valuable specimen. Stunned, Silva can only say he will think about it. He notices the changes and finds himself in the silence of an inner courtyard. A young woman with dark half-braids tends a bed of white flowers. She greets Dan, the priest, as he approaches, and with a smile says the flowers here are extraordinarily beautiful. When she reaches out for a flower, her fingers slip, and she pricks her finger on a thorny stem. A cry of pain cuts through the air. The priest immediately notices her hand. He asks what happened, and she quickly explains. The bruise appeared the day before, and laughing, adds that it is her own clumsiness. She did not notice how exactly it formed. His gaze becomes truly deadly serious. He leans closer and says that what she has is not an ordinary bruise but the devil's curse, and warns, if untreated it will bring her misfortune. Panic grips the young woman as soon as she hears the word curse. The priest almost carelessly explains, they need to go to the church, remove the curse before it is too late. Frightened, she immediately agrees, pleading earnestly to save her, and quickly hurries after him away from the flowers. Silva steps forward before the captain and, maintaining tense restraint, delivers grim news. Another young woman was kidnapped last night, right under the cover of darkness. She hands him a file with the victim's data. As the captain flips through the pages, his eyes widen sharply, and at that moment he is overwhelmed by a sharp, painful recognition. He does not look away from Julia's portrait, and the memory of their brief meeting flashes in his mind as her name echoes in his thoughts. Cold sweat appears on his forehead as the reality sinks in. The girl he spoke to just yesterday is now on the missing list. Feeling his suffering, the captain places a hand on his shoulder and utters a comforting word, promising full support from the knights. In response, he gives a barely noticeable grateful smile. Then he reveals that he has a plan brewing and captures his attention as he explains. There is something they can do. Pointing to the records, he notes a specific mark found on the victim's arm and speaks of the existence of a young survivor. Perhaps he holds the key. With renewed determination, he suggests setting a trap to lure the kidnapper out, and is intent on finding the missing girl. Somewhere far away, the night's silence is broken only by the quiet steps of a priest. He moves through the dark corridors of the shelter while the children sleep. He continues to patrol the premises, but his face reveals nothing at all, passing through the arched passages of the empty building as if he notices no watchful eyes. A young woman approaches him hesitantly. A deep hood hides her features, and she quietly calls him to attract his attention. The priest turns to her and asks what brought her here, but immediately encounters a shock. She points to a dark, disturbing mark drawn directly on her skin. He leans closer, examines the flaw, asks how long it has been there, and explains. The mark appeared only after her recent arrival to the royal capital. Trembling from the grim expression, he adjusts his glasses and delivers a bloody verdict. He declares that this mark is a demon's curse. From such a revelation, the girl shudders and pales with fear. Noticing her despair, he utters a soothing word, promises to resolve everything with a prayer and asks neither payment nor reward for it. She, overwhelmed with desperate gratitude, begs him for help. But the agreement is already made. He gestures for her to go deeper into the quiet corridors of the building, and she obeys without hesitation, step by step. Eventually, they settle in a private room. He sets the kettle and pours a cup of tea, as if hinting that she first needs to relax and clear her mind before they proceed to the counseling session. She takes a sip and immediately feels the pleasant aroma and incredibly delicious taste of the drink. While he sits opposite, he watches her every movement with a calm, inscrutable gaze. A few moments later, she is suddenly overwhelmed by a wave of dizziness. Her body twitches, her vision blurs, and her strength rapidly fades. She tries to pull herself together and touches her head in confusion. She cannot understand why her senses betray her. While the priest does not move, he calmly asks if everything is all right. The moment stretches. He looms over the girl lying face down and watches as the massive white tail of the spirit wolf retreats after a heavy blow. A cold question escapes his lips. He aloud wonders if the strength was enough to end her life. He finds her still alive. She breathes but is unconscious and deeply fainted. He lifts the fragile body and drags it through the doorway, descending into the dark, damp depths of the building. Having reached the stairs down, he enters a secluded storage basement, and without ceremony throws the leaves lying on the floor among stacks of crates and heavy barrels. He inspects the catch, then begins winding a thick rope around his hands and his eyes, not a drop of priestly compassion as he prepares to tie his prisoner, who still remains trapped in a narcotic sleep. Den leans over the seemingly unconscious Yulian, his face mixes worry with a hidden intent. But as soon as her eyelids snap open sharply, a sharp, clever smile flashes on her lips and it throws him off balance. He is twisted with pure horror when Kaguya suddenly appears behind him, her cold, deadly aura cuts through the air. She mocks his pathetic attempt to tie her up, calling him a shameless soul for even daring such a cowardly trick. Backing away, he is seized by feverish confusion, stammering and insisting that she cannot be allowed to be on her feet when she should be sleeping. He was sure the sleeping medicine he gave her should have taken effect long ago. She casually lifts the small medicine bottle and a malicious smirk flashes in her eyes, as she asks if this is exactly the substance he intended to use to tame her. Clicking her wrist, she throws away the container and mocks, as if it tasted too good although she didn't swallow a single drop. Den only shudders with his gaze, feeling the fear growing. His plan is falling apart right before his eyes. She declares bad people deserve proper punishment and reaches out, preparing to unleash her power. He desperately tries to shout for her to wait, but his pleas go unnoticed as she moves to end the fight. Suddenly, a fierce force bursts out and he flies into the air, tumbling, while the ground beneath him crumbles from the very impact of this power. Suddenly, a fierce force bursts out and he flies into the air, tumbling, while the ground beneath him crumbles from the very impact of this power. Silva stands over the fallen priest. His face is stern and uncompromising as he announces that he is taking the man into custody. Just behind him is Kagur's task is to bring the traitor to the end. They looked at the fallen man, and Silver noted Kaguya's impressive skill pretending to be a weak woman so convincingly that even the seasoned con artist Dan was fooled. He watches closely as Charles acts out a demonstrative scene, confidently insists that his heart is like that of a delicate maiden, and can only give a tired, slightly indulgent smile at all her antics. As soon as he shifts his gaze to the matter, he is already above the kneeling priest Dan. His voice trembles. How could he, no matter what, have known that Dan suspected him? The young guard gropes in his head for the very essence of the recent attacks. Usually vampires drink their victims dry, but this time one young girl survived, the only surviving witness. He approaches the captive closer and hints, perhaps the criminal caught at least a moment of mercy for the child. Or had his own reason, for example, his own child, because of whom this strange, inappropriate compassion appeared. He admits this was an important clue, but still not the only reason why he became suspicious even when Dan asks if this is enough to pass judgment. He continues to lay everything out clearly, pointing to another glaring inconsistency. Almost zero struggle and no traces that the supposed kidnapper should have left. Looking sharply and intently, he explains. The absence of witnesses and the way the victims seem to have gone straight into the vampire's claws means they went voluntarily, and most likely with someone they trusted. He states that if the man in the robe told the townspeople that he was performing a ritual to cleanse a curse, they would have followed him into the darkness without any doubt in their minds. Science? Continuing the analysis of the scheme, he tells how easy it is to manipulate those who suddenly have mysterious bruises, while Kaguya watches with an understanding smirk. He watches as the realization hits the priest like a physical blow. Dan's eyes open wide in shock. He is branded a fraud, and his entire disguise is finally fully exposed. Silva stands over an empty warehouse area, and his voice presses as he explains that the marked women were kept here until they were used. He shifts his gaze to Dan. His face is covered in sweat, and the guilt he can no longer hide is readable in every line. Gripping the priest's hand firmly, the young guard suppresses a fierce intent and decides not to lose control, but to escort him to the night order for a formal interrogation. Before they leave, he discreetly slips a note to the man and hoarsely warns to keep silent so that the children nearby do not witness the arrest. When the priest silently looks at the message, the guard sees how this silent promise comes to life in him. His difficult situation has already been understood, and now he must cooperate to find safety. Meanwhile, in the stone corridors of the headquarters, Elda finishes the initial investigation and notes with irritation. That man stubbornly insists that he alone is responsible for the crimes. Silva stands opposite her and voices her skepticism. The priest is just a pawn whom the vampire cornered with threats directed against orphans. He replays their first meeting in his mind. The priest shuddered upon hearing about the cold, yet still managed to weave secret hints about his subordinates. It turns out his probability increases. The actions of the priests were a hopeless silent cry for rescue from a hopeless situation. Listening attentively, Kaguya acknowledges the logic and concludes. A written letter appeal is the only way to bypass the continuous surveillance by the vampire lord. She listens while Silva lays out his deductions step by step. The vampire bypassed her even despite the disguise, so the hint is simple. Someone who knows their real names is watching them. She is impressed by his insight and, like a woman zebra, praises him, calling him a sharp-witted detective for piecing together the enemy's observations. When the weight of the event finally sinks in, the Captain Knight coughs. Her face darkens as soon as the guard says that the vampire has already taken more than 10 victims. The captain's resolve freezes. She sees how the creature's power grows and warns, if left uncontrolled, it will only lead to a new bloody massacre. For now, the young guard's mind races. He puts together the puzzle and realizes that this vampire epidemic perfectly coincides with the first major event of the Academy's training exercises. He realizes the stakes. If a high-level demon attack overlaps with this vampire threat, the future heroes will be defenseless, and then he calls an ally and resorts to a desperate plan. When she holds a focused gaze, he admits, there is a task that only she can handle, and this sparks curiosity in her. Somewhere between the cold glow of the full moon, the moon tower hangs over the landscape, and the young traveler Yulia freezes, looking up at its height. Returning to the group, the woman with the sword quietly laughs to herself. She finds it funny that the guard asks her to look after his beloved while he is away. Eventually, she finds the girl. She recalls the guard's advice, to find this mighty warrior if she truly wants to become stronger. Stronger, she approaches almost up close. A predatory gleam flickers in her eyes, and promising to engrave every lesson into the very essence of the new apprentice, she directs her gaze straight into the soul. Suddenly smiling eerily, she whispers a warning, let the girl not perish during the trial. Tired and gripped by overwhelming tension, the young traveler hesitated but still resolutely agrees, entrusting her fate to the warrior. Elda, an elite captain knight, stands straight before the gathered hero candidates. Her voice carries over the formation, and the knightly statute lays commands on the shoulders of silence, a formal tribute to loyalty and the path they have chosen. While she speaks, Silva shifts gears, and his mind suddenly fixes on the full weight of the upcoming practical training exercise. Not far from him, Charles approaches Alan with a worried expression, asks why he is standing alone, and demands to know what happened to the rest of his people. Her question is cut off by Kaguya. She interrupts with a sharp, contemptuous tone and declares that Charles is no longer considered a member of their group and that he has no right to interfere. Despite the pause, she still presses Alan, interrogating. Why did he participate in the monster-killing exercise alone when the risks were so high? She continues to look intently at him, waiting for an answer and wondering if he really intended to leave things as they are between them. While they argue, Silva suddenly feels a slight prickling of anxiety, as if someone is looking at him hostilely. He turns and sees Kaguya glancing at him, uncontrollably irritated and full of contempt in her thoughts towards some gate guard. He decides to ignore the silent provocation and turns his attention back to the mission, while the group prepares to set out. His gaze slides to where Kaguya's presence is most strongly felt. Her power is perceived as the highest among all the students. And that is why an official order appears to entrust her personally with overseeing Charles and the others training during the trial. Following the instructions, the group gathers near the entrance to the Forest of Trials, where they are immediately warned. Dangerous monsters of ranks 3 and 4 inhabit the woods, and even greater threats lurk deeper inside. He stands among the other candidates, and the examiner's voice thunders across the clearing announcing that Level 1 demons have been released into the training grounds. The armored official continues the stern warning. The guards stay close to protect, and if a candidate fears for their life, they must signal so that the media can rescue them. After the first briefing, attention shifts to the elite captain. She is asked to provide specific details about the upcoming training. She steps forward and explains. The designated battle zone is strictly divided by a magical barrier maintained by the Academy's mages. This shimmering wall of energy stretches above the dense tree canopy, lined with physical stakes, the final warnings for students, not to enter the wild thickets beyond the boundary. The captain clarifies once more. Their work will be evaluated solely by the number of demonic creatures they manage to successfully neutralize within these limits, and reminds everyone to stay vigilant. With a sharp command, she officially begins the trial, and the candidates rush headlong into the darkness of the forest thickets. As the crowd disperses, Alan suddenly calls Charles. She stops and freezes, staring at him with a look full of questions. He approaches her, admits that his previous plan to go alone was foolish, and asks for a moment of her time. Looking her straight in the eyes, the young man makes a sincere request to reform their party. He swears to correct his past mistakes, just give him one more chance. He desperately calls out to Charles, swearing to protect and defend her even if it means paying with his own life, but his words seem to hit a deaf wall. She looks away, her face hardening. For her, even thinking about becoming the same damsel in distress again is exhausting, so she decides to take control of her own safety. Despite his pleading, she continues to make her way through the thicket, firmly ordering him to stop and not follow her. She has her own goals to accomplish. He does not back down. His voice echoes among the trees as he begs her to wait. When she quickens her pace through the thicket, it becomes increasingly difficult for him to catch up, and he insists that their conversation is far from over. But suddenly something in the surroundings distracts her gaze and she freezes in surprise. Charles Orland suddenly appears and calls to the woman she calls Miss Leba, asking why she is here. Next to Charles, Alan's eyes widen as he notices a distinct mark on Miss Leba's arm and with anxiety realizes these are the same thralls Mark Silva warned about. She directly accuses Miss Leba and asks if she has not been turned into a vampire thrall. Charles explains. Silva said that if Crit becomes a thrall, the demons might get a chance to attack them just during their combat practices. Mrs. Leiber with a sullen face is silent while Charles puts the puzzle pieces together, then pronounces his conclusion. She was mole all along. And as soon as the inspiration finds words, the protective barrier around them begins to crack and crumble. Seeing the dark energy bursting from Miss Leba, Alan desperately begs her to stop, threatening to kill her if she continues. But the dark hand clenches into a fist. His pleas are in vain. Suddenly, a huge, muscular demon emerges from the shadows and grabs Charles from behind. He smiles crookedly and declares that the woman they knew as Miss Leba is just a doll. He reveals the doll had only one goal: to make a breach in the barrier for them. Making a turn, the demon disdainfully throws Charles aside like trash. Alan, gripped by horror, can only shout Miss Libby's name. Seeing a new threat, Alan decides that this is a level set as a demon for practical matters. He steals his own determination and thinks if he defeats the demon and protects Charles, he can still save Lady Libby. With a roar, he rushes forward, shouting, "Damn demon, take this!" Lightning slash. The electric attack cuts through the air and flies forward, but the demon stops it effortlessly. Alan squints. The strike should have been enough to knock down the level. But one demon's firepower is less than the strength of his soul-bound technique. The demon looks from top to bottom without any impression, as if it's a trifle. "Hey, what are you doing now?" he snorts contemptuously. "Did you really think you would win with this pathetic attack? Don't equate me to a level 1 prey." He grins with a terrifying confidence, and this reveals what is really happening. "You see, I am level 3. I am on a completely different level." He cracked his fingers, and a predatory smile spread across his face. He declared that he would teach them his name so that they would carry it to the afterlife. He is Garrett, the one who will crush all heroes. Hearing this, Alan suddenly shudders from shock. He realizes that before him is a level 3 demon, an enemy much stronger than he was promised. He glanced back at Charles. The knight apprentice who was struck by the vampire is already stepping forward and addressing the demon, demanding that he say something to her. She does not back down from the interrogation and voices the conclusion. Since Garrett mentioned control over Ms. Leba, it means he works with the vampire and follows his orders. Pushing logic to the limit, she continues to press and forces him to name where the vampire is now. Her sharp question confuses both Garrett and Alan. Garrett's face darkens as he fixes his gaze on the woman and growls where she learned about the vampires. She coldly replies that she owes him nothing. Her disobedience seems to both amuse and enrage him at the same time. Garrett's fist flares and boundless, crackling energy builds within it. From afar, Alan observes the incredible scale of magical power, while the slave servant remains indifferent, motionless. The demon roars that he has no idea how they found out about the plan, but he swears he won't let him turn the wrong way. He declares that he will kill everyone right here. Next to Alan, Charles watches with concern. Shaking off a brief flash of fear, Alan's determination strengthens. He thinks, it doesn't matter that the opponent is level 3, he will still protect Charles. With a gathered cry, Alan rushed forward. Forward, the blade strikes Garrett's forearm and a clang sounds like on hard stone. Garrett curls his lips and hisses that the boy has no fear at all. Alan freezes in shock. The opponent's hand is as hard as stone. He bounces back. Alan realizes he needs to find a weak spot. Garrett laughs, mocking the pathetic counterattack, and rushing forward flies in with a powerful blow. But as soon as the fist flies close, Alan notices a breach, turns around, and shouts. He with fierce fury lowered his blade with a cry, aiming at the demon's neck. The sword struck flawlessly, cutting through Garrett's flesh. But the blow turned out to be a dull thud, not the clean cut he expected. Garrett sharply turned around, and a cheeky smile stretched across his face as he mockingly said whether Alan still couldn't understand. The demon boasted that the mighty body, enhanced by mana, had no weaknesses. Not at all. The rebound threw Alan's sword out of his grip, and he helplessly slid across the dust, bringing no benefit. Hovering over the incapacitated opponent, Garrett declared that the appetizer was already finished. Then Garrett's attention shifted to another. He licked his lips with predatory hunger. He announced that the time for the main course had come, and his gaze fell on the young girl Charles, who stood at a certain distance. A soft glow began to slowly spread from Charles's body. She had known from the very beginning. This demon was much stronger than Alan. Ahead, Garrett waved his hand at her, roaring that he would take her small, fragile body and smash it to mince meat. She did not flinch and held her position, pushing him. Let him try. Her hand stretched out. She began a spell and called her master to appear. A luminous sigil flashed on the ground as soon as she summoned Fenrir Wolf. He solemnly stood before her. This clash became a turning point, recorded in the Chronicle of History. The record states, the students were attacked by a level 3 threat. The text inside the book tells about the monster attack and notes that this battle will go down in history as the first battle of hero Charles. With a stubborn expression, Charles Orland begins the spell. Her hand freezes in an exact gesture. She calls the servant of her master, Fenrir Wolf, to appear before her. A moment and the huge wolf Fenrir, Ruru, materializes beside her in the clearing. On the other side of the road, a muscular demon watches their arrival closely. He snorts, convinced. Her ability to forge spirits is just a funny trick. With a scream, he bursts forward, leaping to shorten the distance. Everything merges into one. The strike misses, cracking the ground where they just stood, so he boldly declares, they are too slow. Now Charles sits on Ruru horseback. He looks around and replies that his pitifully slow attack will never catch them. The demon snorts in response and asks if she really believes she will win just by running away. Her face hardens as she calls the name of her companion. In a firm tone, she cuts off. She never said she was running. At her silent command, Ruru lunged forward at the demon, who burst into loud laughter, declaring the attack too weak. Charles watches and the thought forms in his mind. Ruru cannot handle it alone, so she will not cause harm. The demon proves she is right, sharply throws the wolf aside with a powerful blow. He insists fervently that not a single mangy dog has a chance to defeat him. While he boastfully babbles about victory, a giant clawed hand made of pure shadow bursts from behind and strikes him squarely in the back. The demon whines in pain and shock. Her gaze narrows, becoming too focused. She never claimed that she could control only one elementary spirit. She stood her ground, trapped on both sides by two summons, Fenrir Wolf, Ruru, and a newly revealed dark elemental resembling a raven. She achieved a double summon and formed an unshakable front. Her gaze pinned the demon, clutching his wounded back. She threw him the same boast that he had no weakness and then revealed. Her 8-span raven, which she calls Crowy, has a special ability to find exactly those. While she spoke, she ordered Crowy to turn on his guiding fire and show her his weakness. A barely audible, ghostly spark immediately flared on the demon's chest, branding him. Where the mark stood, she confidently declared he would not dodge her next strike. As she explained, this was the main strength of Crowy and her true intent. The demon snorted, still off balance after the first attack. He snorted contemptuously, calling the attack weak, and boasted that such minor damage would never defeat him. Charles did not flinch. He simply continued the assault until they were overthrown. Furious that the demon called her foolish petty tricks, he lunged forward and wildly swung his fists. The blows ricocheted into the void. Charles deftly dodged. Then he gathered all his strength and spun his punching fist like a whirlwind. It struck the ground with explosive force. Charles shouted to Rira as the shockwave that burst outward threw them both backward. Pushed forward, the shell tense to the Lamith's patience ran out. He declared that he would truly stop the fight with his next attack. Disaster. She admitted to herself no matter how much she wanted to prolong the fight, she had no right to do so. Pushed forward, the shell tense to the Lamith's patience ran out. He declared that he would truly stop the fight with his next attack. Disaster. She admitted to herself no matter how much she wanted to prolong the fight, she had no right to do so. Suddenly the guiding flame on his chest flared up and began spreading all over his body. Charles shuddered. Now he clearly understood what it meant. The demon had thrown down all defenses and was preparing to go all out on his own attack. Life, she trembled, but her wolf partner Ruru stood steadfastly beside her, offering silent support. Treacherously taking away her courage, she told Ruru that they would not run from this blow after all. She herself promised to fight to the very end. Ruru gently nudged her reassuringly. Nearby Silva spoke up and asked to confirm if she was really sure. The demon's attack looked clear and direct. Charles admitted honestly it was only his guess. But he has a duty to track the vampy, and at the same time he passionately wants to protect her. However, he reassured Silva she will also fight, so he will not have to act alone. She looked at him without averting her gaze and cut in. It does not suit her to live her whole life only under someone's protection. A confident smile spread across her face as she spoke her dream. She would become a hero. And the work of heroes is to fight demons. Silva responded with a warm smile and raised a finger as if approving what was said. He wished her luck and firmly stated that a great heroic future awaited Haran, that he unquestionably believed in it. His words definitely moved her. He pushed her forward with his own fate hand, his face sharpened, focused. She realized, if the demon really did not intend to lower its guard, then this would be her greatest chance. When the giant fist of the demon lunged down directly at her, she shouted a command and directed her crow summoner Crowy straight into the line of attack. Attack! The demon laughed loudly, mocking her tactics, far too superficial. He roared that she was dead meat, and his drum-like fist was literally a moment away from striking, until Charles's eyes widened in obvious surprise. The face, but his fist suddenly froze in the air, hanging just a moment before her face, stopped by an invisible force. Raising her gaze to the stunned demon, she said coldly, "This is the end for me." That invisible force holding the demon's fist was given by someone else. As Fenrir explained, his true goal, the ability could apply effects to his allies' attacks, not just his own. The effect was devastating. The devil roared madly in pain as the invisible force completely crushed both his eyes. When the opponent was blinded, Charles calmly stated that there was nothing he could do and demanded information about the vampire. Yet he had already pulled out his last trump card, frantically searching for a small vial. The demon muttered with disgust that he was forced to rely on the power of vampires. Boldly he shouted, "So be it." He swallowed the contents while Charles watched, trying to understand what it was. Instantly a wave of power surged through the demon's body. His mana flared to an incredible new level, and Charles could only watch anxiously as his strength grew exponentially. Financially, he snorted contemptuously, impressed. Living human blood could grant him such power. With one explosive blow, he hurled Charles across. The impact raised a cloud of dust and debris. When the fight flared up again, Charles's summoned Crowy flew to a safe place and carried the unconscious Fenrir out of danger. The noise stirred someone else nearby. Lying among the ruins, Rachel Forsett slowly opened her eyes, confused, stunned, and unable to understand what exactly had happened. In the very heart of the battle, Charles lay on the ground and was at the mercy of the demon. Raising her gaze to her giant opponent, she screamed, calling the summon. In a moment, Crowy was beside her, ready. Defender, the demon looked down at her, and in that was both respect and anger. He recognized her as a formidable enemy and honestly said, without the power of blood he would have lost. But now that power was his, so he raised his huge fist and roared a vow that all heroes be dead. His fist froze in the air, and it was not a shadow of fear on Charles's face pulsed a calm smile. She snorted, as if fear could drive her insane. She only thanked and explained. Thanks to his fighter, she understood she too can become even stronger. Her calm determination is unwavering. She declares that this time she will definitely defeat him, even if he resorts again to another cheap trick. Before he can respond, the ground begins to shake fiercely. The demon looks around, confused, trying to understand where this disturbance is coming from. Far in the sky, a giant barrier of light suddenly bursts from above, striking the forest with incredible force, as if the heavens themselves had delivered a blow. The demon freezes in shock. He recognizes this phenomenon as a barrier. From above, a new voice calls Charles, calls him its apprentice, admires this sturdy toy-like creature below. With a pained expression, Charles reluctantly agrees to allow her, the new master, to have him. The novice, Lady Kaguya, smiles with predatory pleasure, accepts the offer and declares that she will not hold back. Aloud she contemplates how exactly she should play with